At a ball in the royal palace, two girls were talking about a guest who had come, and they did not understand why. She stood quietly to the side, without communicating with anyone at all, and seemed quite lonely. The girls continued to whisper, saying that Stephanie had come to meet the greatest wizard. From the outside, it looks quite funny, because how could he think that such a young man could even look in his direction? But upon seeing the modest girl, the young man immediately went up to her and began to caress her cheek with his hand, after which she smiled sweetly and called the girl a little fool. This is a story about the beloved of a great magician, but unfortunately, her fate is already predetermined. Our heroine was walking down the hall with a cup in her hands and heard people calling her name. When the call had turned into a scream, "Why did she stay there so long?" "Let her move," the girl exclaimed. "She's coming." Upon entering the room, Estefania saw a girl crying in bed, and next to her a woman who was trying to calm her down and telling her that everything would be okay and that there was no need to cry. Our heroine ran to the bedroom and said that she had brought Angelica hot milk with honey. The girl whimpered that she didn't want it and threw the cup out of his hands. Estefania didn't expect him to do this and stood there completely confused. The woman immediately said that her daughter was not feeling well and that there was no need to come here and bother her. Our heroine quietly apologized, but all she heard in response was a deep sigh and a disgruntled murmur that she should clean everything up and leave. Then the lady turned to her daughter and asked her to tell her mother what had happened to her. The girl began to cry loudly and say that her stomach hurt a lot and that it was difficult to bear. The mother hugged her and began to apologize for the fact that it was her fault that she had been born that way. Estefania looked at them sadly and said she would go cook dinner. She thought to herself that if she told her mother that she remembered her past life, she would decide that the girl had gone crazy. No one would believe her, and they would decide that it was all a fairy tale. The thing is that she was reincarnated into one of the characters from the novel The Beloved of the Mighty Magician. The story tells about a girl with a very unfortunate destiny who met a wizard, and he, with the help of his power, helped her return to her former glory. The main character's name is Angelica. Lana Bylust is her younger sister at the moment. It's very ironic to be reborn as her older sister, but she is definitely in the world of that work and clearly remembers its plot. Her family is descended from the royal family of an eastern country called Elizabeth, but unfortunately, they had to flee their homeland and settle in this house. Lives Angelica, who has had health problems since she was little, and also his mother, who suffers from overprotective syndrome and constantly dusts him. Our heroine also lives in this village, but as refugees from another country, they have no servants, no power, and no means of subsistence. Although she has been living in this world for a long time, she still cannot remember what role Estefania played in the plot of the play. Most likely, she was some secondary character whose fate was not revealed in the book, an unloved and forgotten eldest daughter who was always at anyone's beck and call. Every day, the girl regrets that God gave her a chance at a second life, because this place is like hell on earth. In one of the taverns, a woman shouted that the order was ready and let Esh take it to the customer. The boy immediately took the plate and said he would do it all now. After placing it on the table in front of the customer, he apologized for the wait and added that the pork chop with vegetables was ready. The man thanked him and told him to bring him another glass of his delicious beer. The waiter immediately shouted to the bartender that his guest wanted to drink some more beer. In reality, it was Estefania, and since her family had absolutely no money, she had to work part-time at night, and to hide her identity, she pretended to be a young man. This is a pretty popular place, so the salary is decent. She has to work every day, so she gets very tired, but at least in the tavern she can escape from reality, that is, from her unwanted eldest son. After a short period of time, the waiter brought what the customer ordered. The man looked at her intently and apologized in advance for the question she was going to ask. But somehow he looked too pale. Was everything okay with him? Our heroine replied that he just seemed fine, and that everything was fine with her. But the guest exclaimed, how could he be fine if he was so pale? And the young man saw his own hands, only skin and bones. How can someone be so insignificant? He then added that there was a doctor resting there so he could look at the child. Another young man supported this idea and said that Esh works in this establishment every day and just needs to rest, otherwise, at this rate, he could end up in the grave. The girl tried to calm them down and told them that they shouldn't worry so much, that everything was fine with her. Suddenly, our heroine was attacked by a severe coughing fit. He then apologized and said that it seemed like he just had a minor cold, but there was blood on his hand. This image horrified those present, and they shouted for a doctor to immediately examine this young man. The woman agreed with them and said that there was no need to be stubborn as it would be completely free. Everyone got tired of trying to persuade her, so the doctor simply took Estefania in his arms to examine her. After the exam, the girl said she knew she needed more rest, but she wasn't in any pain, and everyone else was just exaggerating. The man looked very sad and replied that he, unfortunately, did not believe it at all, and that he was surprised that he was still standing. All the symptoms indicate that he has Yuga disease, which is a very rare and incurable disease. The most terrible thing is that little by little the whole body stops working. Our heroine began to understand perfectly what she was talking about because she remembered what awaited her older sister at work. The doctor apologized disappointedly and said that no one had yet invented a cure for this disease. Unfortunately, the young man faces a terrible and painful death, and nothing can be done about it. Our heroine understood why she did not remember anything about Estefania's fate, since it was only mentioned in the work itself. But the girl was still dazed and asked in a trembling voice how much time she had left. The doctor replied that, given all the symptoms, he had very little time. Estefania asked not to keep secrets and to tell her the truth about exactly how much time was left. After a pause, the doctor replied that if he was lucky, he might live another 3 months. His condition indicated that the disease was in an extreme phase and death might occur sooner. As the man said before, there is no cure for this disease due to its rarity, and they haven't even been able to invent it yet, so he can't help you forgive him. The girl exclaimed that he should raise his head, not to worry, that everything would be perfectly fine for her. The doctor shouted, "What other order?" He could die soon. But when the man raised his head and saw our heroine, his expression changed. The girl smiled from ear to ear and said everything would be okay, honestly. On the way home, Estefania thought about how she had barely been allowed to leave work, but could finally be alone. All her companions, and those present in the tavern, got drunk and began to mourn her impending death. The girl could not even imagine that they cared so much about her. The strange thing is that they knew absolutely nothing about her, but they were much more worried than her own family. Suddenly, she heard a noise not far from her in the bushes. Clearly someone was there. Some children jumped right in front of her, and when they saw her, they screamed in surprise. The boy's expression immediately changed to one of disdain, and he asked her why she was lurking around. Then he looked her over from head to toe and concluded that the stranger must be a servant. His companion grimaced, covered her face with a handkerchief in disgust, and exclaimed, "What a miserable sight!" And it smelled of smoke. Then they started talking out loud. Who would have thought that this trash lived in such a luxurious mansion? Our heroine was a little upset by this, as she didn't deserve to be treated like this. Since they settled in that village, the girl began to notice something strange. Some things started to disappear, like the old cuckoo clock that was hanging on the wall looked like it had been stolen. Our heroine asked what the dear gentlemen were doing at her door late at night. The boy exclaimed irritably that this had absolutely nothing to do with the commoner. Estefania did not want to get involved in the conflict, so she said that since it was like this, she would probably go. But suddenly they shouted, "Enough!" The seemingly sweet girl declared that if she told anyone that she had seen them there, then Milady would personally see to it that she and the entire family were eliminated. Our heroine didn't react to this and simply moved on. Opening the front door, the girl announced that she had arrived home. Angelica, who was coming down the stairs, said irritatedly that she was late. Estefania replied that it was late and asked why she was still awake. The youngest replied that she was sick. She lay in that secluded place as if in a cage, and she dared to go to bars and have fun for her own pleasure. Our heroine exclaimed that she was not having fun and that her little sister had misunderstood everything. The girl sighed deeply and asked if such a miserable existence, that is, being born with those cursed eyes, did not weigh her down. The reason they ran away from their homeland was because they and their sister were born with cursed eyes. While all royals have blue eyes, no one was happy about their birth. Angelica said that she is very envious of her older sister, even though she was not born with blue eyes, but she is healthy and strong and can easily go out on the street whenever she wants. And she is like a bird that was locked in a weak cage and suffers this pain eternally, Why was she lucky enough to be born healthy, but is forced to exist and not to live? Our heroine looked at her and thought that her little sister was deeply mistaken. The main character of the work is Angelica, an exiled princess from an eastern country who lost her older sister to an incurable disease. In the novel, after Estefania's death, she changed a lot. The death of her relative influenced her vision of the world, and at this point, they are approaching the very beginning of the story, where the eldest dies in agony. Her mother came out into the hallway and noticed that her daughter was still not sleeping, and said that it was cold in the house at night, so it was better to go to bed. Ignoring her second daughter, the woman turned around and started to leave, but our heroine called out to her. Mom turned around and irritatedly asked what he wanted from her. When the girl said she wanted to discuss something with her, the woman yawned and asked if she could wait until tomorrow morning, as she was very tired. Estefania tried to object and said that she wanted to tell him something very important. The mother immediately hissed angrily at her that she should stop behaving so selfishly and let her sleep. Our heroine was upset by such treatment, but said nothing more. Lying in her bed, Estefania thought that she still couldn't believe that she would soon return to the other world, but it was inevitable. She is destined to die again in 3 months, but would like to meet Mr. Chenel one last time. The powerful wizard Chenel Crowley is her favorite character in this novel, as well as being Angelica's future husband. I wanted to see him in person, at least with one eye. Not just read a description of his appearance, but look at him, smell him, observe his facial expressions. Just by looking at the young man for a moment, he will be able to rest forever. Then Estefania sat up abruptly and wondered what was stopping her from meeting him, since she literally lived in the world of this novel. Since she is destined to die anyway, she can at least fulfill her long-held wish. After which, our heroine looked out the window at the full moon and whispered that she would definitely meet Mr. Chenel. The next day, when the girl went to the doctor, he realized that she was Esh. The girl smiled and said she came to thank him and say goodbye. The man asked him where he was going so spontaneously. Our heroine replied that she would head to the Central Lands. The doctor was surprised at first, but then muttered that perhaps there were specialists there who were developing a cure for Yuga's disease, but in his condition, it was dangerous to go there. Estefania smiled sweetly and replied that there was nothing to worry about. That was her last, selfish wish before her imminent death. The man threw up his hands and said that if she really wanted him, then no one had the right to stop her. The girl noticed that this was indeed the case, after which she bowed and thanked him for revealing the truth to her. When the young man replied that he was a doctor after all, and that it was his duty, Estefania said that she was still very grateful to him. The doctor suggested that all the boys in the tavern would want to see her off anyway if she would come to see them to say goodbye. Our heroine replied that she would also like to see them very much, but unfortunately, it was time to go. After which, Stephanie turned around and began to walk away as there was little time. The man called her by her name Esh and told her that he did not know if they would meet again, but begged her to fight for her life until the end. The girl turned to him and told him her name was Estefania. Lana Belest. Please remind her. Upon hearing his full name, the doctor realized that he was a member of the royal family who had been unwanted since birth. The irony of our heroine's life was that her current life was no different at all from the past. She still had the same sick younger sister and the same mother who suffered from overprotective syndrome. There was also the elder sister, who was forced to work every day from morning to night to provide the younger one with expensive treatment. Living a second life exactly the same had a persistent feeling of déjà vu. His previous existence ended due to constant overwork and severe fatigue. This time, she was dying of an incurable disease. Why was she so unlucky in both this life and the next? Was she like in hell? The only difference is that this time it's Shin or Shai. Crowley last died without ever knowing the joy of life and striving only for the good of others. But this time, the girl wants to dedicate the rest of her days to fulfilling her own most precious wishes. The thoughts were interrupted by the coachman's voice, announcing that they had arrived at their destination. Looking around, our heroine exclaimed that this is the homeland of the wizards, called the Central Lands, and that her favorite hero from the novel lives here. Estefania comes from the Eastern Kingdom, Isabel, but in addition to the 4 kingdoms, there is another part. In ancient times, a great land of magicians and sorcerers appeared, and its name was Central Lands. The girl noticed that since this is the homeland of all wizards by nature, they are very proud and arrogant and do not like strangers, so there is no need to attract attention and act according to the original plan. Our heroine thought the author was exaggerating that all the inhabitants of the magical lands were so arrogant until she encountered a situation. Two guys were arguing with each other. One was yelling that he had an appointment for today, and the other one was yelling back saying that there was actually a line. Estefania notices that they are very aggressive and are willing to kill each other, so it is necessary to flee, otherwise she could also get hurt. But before the girl could take a step, there was a knock on the wall right behind her. Our heroine had just thought that, thank God, she had escaped unharmed when a voice was heard asking her if everything was okay with her. Straightening up, he began to turn his head in different directions, but saw no one beside him. The voice said that she was a little further down. The girl immediately looked down and saw a little boy. The baby exclaimed that she must be Norma. It was too dangerous for her to be in that place, and it was better to leave. That's what they call people who don't know how to do magic. She hasn't even had time to do anything yet, and the little girl has already realized that Estefania has no magic. The boy exclaimed angrily that these old farts were already bothering everyone. They were always arguing over all sorts of nonsense. Our heroine claimed that he must be a local, after which she asked him if he knew how to stop them, since they could destroy the city. The boy replied that my lady should not worry, that such a thing would never happen as long as there was a master in the city. Suddenly, there was a powerful explosion behind them, and the boys who were fighting were swept away somewhere to the side. One of the young men holding the bruised area exclaimed, "What insolent fellow had dared to interfere in their conversation?" Then he looked up and saw the master, after which he came to the conclusion that this was his end. The young man hissed, "How dare you disturb their peace?" The boys immediately began to bow and say that they didn't want to bother him because they had just had a little argument. The boys really apologize, but the young man stood firm and decided to put them in their place with the help of his magical abilities. After the powerful explosion, the young people were left lying on a pile of stones, unconscious. The girl looked at him in admiration, with tears in her eyes, and whispered how incredible it was. She couldn't believe she was seeing Mr. Chenel in person. Then I saw him getting ready to leave, and I realized that I needed to do something urgently. Then she ran towards him, yelling at him to wait a bit because she needed to say something. The young man decided to respond to his request, so he stopped. Without wasting any time, Estefania blushed and said that she loved him with all her heart. The young man was bewildered by what he heard and asked again what he had just said. The girl immediately came to her senses and thought that as soon as she saw his beautiful face, these words burst out on their own. Lord Chenel did not react in any way to this, and simply evaporated instantly into thin air. Estefania turned to the boy and apologized for making him see something so strange, but most importantly, she never thanked him for saving her, and then asked him his name. The boy replied that he was always happy to help, and said his name was Yuchi. Our heroine also introduced herself in response, and said that her name is Estefania. Upon hearing her name, the boy asked if he could call her Fanny. The girl replied, "Why not?" The new acquaintance was very happy and solemnly exclaimed, "Hooray!" Our heroine noticed that there was so much joy in his voice, even though it seemed silly that she even envied him a little. Then the boy said that she must have come to the Central Lands for the magic request. The girl replied that he was very intelligent, and that was exactly how it was. In this world, there were two types of people: the Norms, who could not cast spells, and the wizards. At one time, the Norms were afraid of the greatness of the wizards, so the latter devised a special service. These are magic requests. Requests for help from any end of the continent arrive at this place. The magicians, in turn, agree to fulfill any request of the needy Fanny wanted to use this in order to meet with Chenel. The boy exclaimed that he was now willing to fulfill his request, although it was not obvious by looking at him. But he was a fairly powerful magician. Our heroine apologized and said that she had come to those places specifically to personally ask Mr. Crowley for help. Yuchi looked at her in surprise and said that if she wanted something from the master, then he couldn't do it. When Estefania asked why, the boy replied that there was really no guarantee that Chenel would personally respond to her request. First, the request is studied by the special services, which determine the complexity of the task, and then assign a wizard. The wizard deals only with extremely difficult cases. The girl immediately became upset, but the boy added that he could hear her, and that depending on the question, he would give an answer as to whether Crowley would accept her. But our heroine was already deep in thought, and thought that nothing would come of it. She didn't know that such a policy existed in the Central Lands. Her plan to meet with the knight failed in a matter of seconds. Looking at the sad Fani, Yuchi asked her if she wanted to marry the master. The girl was taken aback by such a question and did not know what to answer. The boy said that she simply confessed her feelings to him, and that's why he came to that conclusion. Estefania immediately began to say that he had misunderstood everything and that she did not want to marry him, that she was just a fan and nothing more. The boy apologized for such a ridiculous assumption, as ladies often come to them with such a request. The girl thought that the novel really said that many people dreamed of marrying him, but did she want that? Yuchi added that if my lady just wants to meet him, then he can help her with this. Our heroine was very surprised and asked how a baby could do that. The boy said that he could do everything even if it was impossible, and that everything else would remain a secret. After which, the boy snapped his fingers and declared that they were going to meet the master right now. A broom immediately appeared under his feet, and he told his new acquaintance to sit down, but hold on tighter. After this, they took off into the air and went towards Mr. Chenel. After standing in front of the gloomy young man for a while, our heroine thought that of course she dreamed of meeting him, but not in that atmosphere. The boy simply pushed her into the throne room and immediately fled. The magician got tired of that prolonged silence, so he told the guest to finally start talking. Fani thought to herself that there would be no other option as she was already standing next to him. So she first thanked him for the fact that despite his busy schedule, the boy could dedicate time to her. She would like to ask you as a magician to allow her to stay in this castle for 2 months. The young man looked at her and asked if the girl knew that this joke could cost her her life. Our heroine understood that it was true. If she was careless in her words, he could really kill her. That's the kind of person Chenel was. Crow. She of course doesn't mind dying at his hands, considering that in any case, her days are numbered. But since Fanny has come this far, she has no intention of retiring, so she said out loud that she wasn't joking. She then said her name was Stephanie. Lana Belest is the crown princess of the Eastern Kingdom, but she was not born with blue eyes, which are considered a sign of belonging to the imperial family. The girl was expelled from her homeland, but despite this, royal blood still runs through her veins. Here in her country, she does not fear the laws of the East. The Central Lands is a kingdom where the laws of others do not apply, and everyone has the right to receive protection and support here. Even if the king, her father, discovers where she is, he will not be able to do anything to her. The girl realizes that she cannot enjoy his hospitality forever, so she wants to go to another continent. But unfortunately, at the moment, he does not have the money or the documents to leave, so he is asking for asylum. In a few months, he will earn enough to leave. It didn't even seem like a lie, the young man asked. So what? She may really be a princess, but what good would it do to keep her in the country? Our heroine understood that no magician would fulfill a request without some benefit for himself. She needed to offer something valuable in return, so he couldn't refuse. That's why our heroine exclaimed that she would now explain everything to him. The power of wizards increases depending on the phase of the moon. At the time of the full moon, they rise to the peak of their powers, and only Mr. Chenel hates this day. The full moon helps take the wizard's powers to a whole new level. But the young boy's powers spiral out of control, causing him incredible pain and suffering. Only Estefania knew about this, because she had read the work. The boy must have been sick already because the full moon would soon arrive. Then the girl handed him the medicine and told him that it would help relieve the pain. The young man just moved his finger a little, and immediately the medicine appeared in his hands, which he immediately began to try. Our heroine immediately said that there was no poison there, but that if he didn't believe her, he could drink it in front of him. After these words, the young man immediately opened the bottle and began to drink. Fanny remembered the recipe for this medicine, as it was described in the work, along with the step-by-step instructions for its preparation, and really hoped it would work. After a short period of time, the boy noticed that he actually felt better. While the girl was happy that it worked, the boy asked how long the effect would last. Estefania responded that it doesn't last long, so she recommends taking it on a full moon night. The wizard's next question was where he learned the recipe for this potion. Our heroine replied that a magician she knew taught her this. When the young man asked who exactly, Fanny replied that she couldn't say if he gave his name, then she would no longer need to fulfill his request. But to herself, she thought that person was himself, or rather Crowley as a character in the novel. There was a scene where during the full moon, Chenel was suffering, and the main character did everything he could to alleviate his suffering. She is very sad to have to use knowledge of the original story, but does not believe her actions will significantly affect the plot. The girl will still face inevitable death, but the knight will live a happy life with Angelica. Suddenly, the guy pushed her to the ground and put a knife on her chest, after which he said that she was brave enough to be an ordinary woman, so it was time to confess everything honestly. Our heroine asked in surprise what he was talking about. Crowley said that today in the city she confessed her love to him, didn't she? Fanny thought to herself that the wizard was not interested in women and relationships, so she thought he would not give importance to her words, but she remembered them all this time. The boy continued that it was very convenient she found a potion that would cure his illness, and asked him to live with her under the same roof. Did she really decide to seduce him like all the other women? The magician sees through these people. He is not interested in their personality or their feelings. All he needs is the status of the wife of a great magician. Our heroine got upset that he thought exactly that way and whispered that the guy was wrong, after which she lost her temper and shouted that she didn't know anything about other girls, but that she really liked him. The young woman has every right not to love, but she will not allow anyone to say that her feelings are not real. Estefania thought to herself that she had fallen in love with him back then. Her life was full of difficulties, failures, and unhappiness, and only Chenel was an outlet for her. When it was difficult or sad, she always reread her favorite passages with him. Then the girl exclaimed that she had no plans to become his wife. She really likes the guy, but she'll be leaving the continent in a couple of months and has no intention of changing anything. The wizard immediately hid the dagger and simply sat down beside him, after which he looked at her attentively and asked if the girl really loved him. Our heroine involuntarily smiled, blushed, and replied that she loved him very much. The young man replied that in that case he agreed to fulfill his request. Estefania immediately said that she would live in that country under the grass and more peaceful than water, and that she would not bother him for anything. But she still decided to ask the knight why he was asking her about her feelings for him. The young man replied that he was simply convinced once again of one thing, that she was ideal for the role of his wife. The girl began to feel that she was losing contact with the outside world, and the boy asked her if she was listening to him at all. Our heroine answered yes, but she doesn't understand what he is talking about. The young man repeated once again that she was the ideal girlfriend for him. Fanny couldn't believe what she was hearing, because this meant that he wanted to marry her. But why? Because in the original work, Chenel only loved Angelica. The young man immediately added that she should not misunderstand him. He was already tired of meeting women every month who wanted to marry him, so he thought it would be a good idea to marry her. Our heroine realized that she was referring to a fictitious marriage. Crowley did not need anyone's love yet. Due to his status as a great magician, he gained power in the Central Lands. The guy is considered the most powerful ruler among all the kingdoms. In other words, if you win his heart, you can become the wife of the most influential man on the continent. That's why he started to suspect her, because every woman wants to be his girlfriend because of her status. It's not that Fanny was against the sham marriage, but in 3 months she would die, and in 2 she would have to leave the Central Land. That's why I decided to clarify if everything was okay with him, because in a couple of months she would leave. Their union would not last long, and they wouldn't be able to avoid the rumors if they got married so quickly. The young man replied that it did not bother him at all. If he were the bride, his presence in that place would not seem suspicious to him. Besides Mr. Chenel, there are many other wizards living in the castle. If Norma suddenly starts living there, she will attract a lot of unnecessary attention. But if she's in the role of Crowley's girlfriend, she'll be able to avoid sidelong glances in her direction. So after thinking about it a bit, Estefania exclaimed that she agreed. The great magician looked at her and said that they had now reached an agreement. The girl began to think about what she should do next. Maybe she should behave in some appropriate manner. The young man replied that this was not necessary. that he should first be assigned a bodyguard, and that he could contact him if he had any questions. Then the young man said to someone, "Come in," and immediately a guy appeared at the door. Our heroine looked over Chenel's shoulder to see who was there and wondered what kind of character it was. Seeing the girl, the stranger exclaimed that everything was now clear to him. The crazy fan had returned to the presence of the master. Let the master give her just 1 second, and he will be free of her. But when Crowley said that this was his girlfriend, the young man was paralyzed with surprise. From this day on, the safety of his beloved will be the boy's main concern. After which, he quickly disappeared without allowing the bodyguard to ask him some questions that arose. Our heroine noticed that he disappeared without really explaining anything, which is very typical of her style. The young man muttered that, of course, he didn't understand anything, but since the teacher said it, then it was fine. The girl immediately introduced herself and told him she was glad to meet him. The young man said his name was Elliot and that he was the master's right-hand man. Estefania looked at him in surprise and thought that she didn't remember that such a character existed in the book. Noticing that the girl was looking at him in silence, the boy asked her if she was really captivated by his incredible beauty. Although the young man can understand her perfectly, that is why the master took him into his service as a pupil. He is so beautiful that he himself feels ashamed. It's his gift and his curse. What can you do if the boy was born so perfect and beautiful? Fanny thought to herself that he was quite a peculiar person. Then Elliot grabbed his hands and said that he couldn't even imagine how difficult it was for him to live with such a beautiful face. Listening to all this nonsense, the girl noticed that she had a kind of bad feeling. A couple of hours later, the boy continued to stream and said that there was no point in discussing how difficult it was to live when he was attracting so much attention. Estefania couldn't take it any longer and said that she thought that enough had been said about her beauty for today. It's already night outside. From today on, he will live in this castle, and he would like to rest a little. The young man immediately came to his senses and apologized, adding that they had gotten carried away by the conversation, and so he needed to take her to his chambers. On the way, the girl noticed that it was impossible to silence him, but now the boy was very quiet. Unexpectedly, Elliot said that he is considered one of the most beautiful people in the world. But does she know who is really perfect? It is Mr. Chenel, Raven, and it is not about a perfect face or magic. It is beautiful, like a lonely rose in the garden that no one dares to touch. He then turned to her and added that he loved beautiful things very much, but he hated it when anyone tried to dishonor his beauty, and the word bride defamed his master's beautiful image. Then the boy laughed out loud and asked why he had to make that facial expression. He knew perfectly well that his status was fake, although he had no idea why the gentleman needed a fake girlfriend. After which he looked at her attentively and asked if it was all a lie. The girl exclaimed that yes, due to the circumstances she needed to live in that place for some time, but apart from status, nothing connected them. The young man replied that perhaps that was the case now, but that in the future they might begin to be connected by something more than fiction. The master is a very charming young man. It is not surprising to fall in love with him suddenly. He wants to become Fanny's beloved. After all, she herself cannot know what her feelings for him will be. Our heroine felt restless and tried to gather her thoughts so she could respond with something. But Elliot interrupted her and told her that the gentleman would never love her if she remembered. He then led her into the room and told her that no one had lived there for a long time, so it might be a little dusty. The girl was stunned by the state of the room and couldn't even breathe normally. The young man smiled, feigning sweetness, and said that nothing could be done about it. Chenel ordered to find him a room, but this was the only free bedroom in the castle. Estefania replied that she understood everything and added that he also assigned her a bodyguard. Although he was not obliged to do so, she was very grateful to him for that. I thought it would still be okay to clean this room. Finally, the boy said that he did not advise her to leave the room without his accompaniment, because otherwise something terrible could happen to her. Our heroine asked in surprise what he was talking about, but the young man did not respond. He wished her sweet dreams and walked away. Throwing off the dusty sheets, the girl thought that compared to living in a mansion with her mother and younger sister, this was still like paradise. Then he went to bed and noticed that the day had dragged on for a long time. But it had been fun. Estefania could not even imagine that on the first day she would meet her favorite hero. Apparently, luck was on her side. Plus, I could see her smile, which is just lovely. Elliot aside that day was good. Fani couldn't even dream that she would meet Crowley while she was still alive and in her right mind, and positive events have a good effect on her mental and physical state. Mom must be in shock that her daughter is gone. But if she had said goodbye to her in person, she would never have let her go. Now, Fani was just beginning to live up to the words her mother had been repeating all her life about her selfishness. 3 days earlier, a woman approached him and said she would like to discuss something because it was her birthday soon. The girl had completely forgotten about him. Her 16th birthday would be in 2 months, just before her death. Angelica decided that she wanted to get revenge on the royal family for making her older sister and mother suffer. She made this decision on the same day her loved one passed away forever. 16 is the age of adulthood in this world. It's very ironic that he won't even live to see it. Angelica's birthday should be celebrated in a special way this year because the girl will be coming of age. Our heroine was disappointed because she thought the woman wanted to talk specifically about her vacation. Without paying attention to her expression, the mother continued saying that she needed her daughter's help because she wanted to buy a dress that the minor wanted so much. Interrupting her, Estefania immediately responded that she should refuse. The woman always thinks only of herself, and now of the gift, so she should buy it herself. She thought to herself that she wouldn't be there for her sister's birthday anyway, so the girl saw no point in helping. The mother objected that it was a very special day for her little sister, and that she did not want to please her. Our heroine shouted that in fact this is also her special day, and they are already pampering Angelica in every possible way, but this is already going beyond all reasonable limits. The woman immediately began to scream that she was the older sister and was therefore obliged to pamper and take care of her younger sister. Doesn't she understand that the girl was born sick and helpless, and Stephanie, unlike her, is not limited by the illness and can do whatever she wants? Is it really that difficult to please her on this special day, without always thinking only of you? Mom was never on her side, so our heroine decided that she would leave home quietly. She wondered out loud that if she were her youngest daughter, would her mother work so hard for her happiness? The woman asked her why she was asking those questions, and when the girl replied that she was just asking, she exclaimed that it was nonsense and that she was tired of arguing with her. After which, Mom turned around and simply walked away, thus evading the answer. Then the girl sat up in her bed and noticed that she was very thirsty. But suddenly, he saw someone's huge red eyes in the window, and he became very scared. Estefania was so scared that she froze and couldn't say a word. Elliot's words that he did not advise her to leave the room without his accompaniment, as something terrible might happen to her. Could this really be what the young man had warned him about? In the morning, upon hearing talk of red eyes in the window, the boy replied that he had no idea what it could have been. Let me understand you well. In this castle, you can encounter anything: spirits, fairies, demons. It may be that some young wizard has summoned a familiar and has not been able to confront it. Generally, the full moon is approaching, and the magic in all the wizards' heads increases every day. Fani replied that he was talking about how, if she left the room without his knowledge, she would immediately be in danger. But how does he know that if she stays in that room, she will be okay? The young man said that in the Central Lands, there was not a single corner that my lady could consider safe for herself. The young man then added that if there were no more questions, then he should have his breakfast. Looking at the bread and water, the girl said that of course she understood that she had arrived suddenly and that they were not expecting food for her. But was that really all? Elliot looked at her angrily and replied that that was all, that maybe she was just not happy about something. Our heroine was confused by such treatment and could not say anything in response. The young man then exclaimed that that was great, then pointed to the side and added that if he needed to wash his clothes, the bathroom was there. Then he started walking towards the door. But Estefania called him and asked if she could meet Mr. Chenel. The boy replied that the master had left the castle on an urgent mission and would arrive within a week. The girl realized that it would be right on the full moon and that she would need a new portion of medicine, so it was necessary to prepare. After which she smiled sweetly and thanked the bodyguard for the information provided. At that moment, Stephanie did not even suspect the suffering that Elliot had in store for her. 5 days later, our heroine was lying in her bed and thinking about how incredibly hungry she was. During this time, Elliot did everything he could to make her want to escape the castle on her own. She saw him only once a day when he brought breakfast, and it was always just water and bread. Estefania herself, she has nowhere to return to, but being there is really very hard mentally since she eats once a day and has absolutely no strength left. Even moving around the room is something our heroine can do with great difficulty. Fani cannot sleep peacefully at night, as she is again afraid of seeing a pair of red eyes outside the window. She is constantly and incredibly cold. If this continues, she will die of hunger rather than disease. It is simply unbearable. If you stay in the bedroom one more day, you may not wake up in the morning. The girl walked down the hall and thought that she needed to find Yuchi. Stopping near the balcony, our heroine noticed some people in the distance. Estefania found out that one of them was none other than Magdalena. Dynamic Dot. The girl is the main antagonist in the original work, who is madly in love with Chenel. It was she who constantly prevented Angelica from getting close to him in any way. Many readers were irritated by Magdalena's stubbornness and obstinacy. People left comments that she was incredibly annoying that she admitted defeat Crowley would never be with her. It's surprising the wizard didn't send her to hell, because how can you tolerate someone like her? In the novel, the boy tried to avoid her by all possible means. Did he really decide to marry her just so Lively could get rid of him? That's probably true. But if Fani becomes Chenel's girlfriend, she could be in danger from a crazy villain. If a girl sees her right now, it clearly won't end well. Therefore, she decided it was best to quickly return to the room before the antagonist saw her. When our heroine entered the bedroom, she was again attacked by a severe coughing fit. After this, seeing blood on her hand, the girl noticed that he had reappeared. Then Stephanie became very ill and simply passed out. Meanwhile, an irritated Elliot walked down the hall and thought about how much the young man bothered him that he thought the girl would run away on the first night. As soon as this girl appeared in the castle, the boy immediately started following her. But due to the magic the master cast on his office, he can't hear what they are talking about. And then, having heard the master's wishes, she understood that he wanted to get rid of her. He actually lied to the dumb girl a bit, since Chenel's right-hand man is a little brat. But she won't last long. Once the boy makes her go away, Crowley will see her potential. Elliot discovered that the girl was the crown princess of an eastern country, and that must be the reason why the master did not take her out of the castle with such rough methods, but wanted the girl to leave of her own free will. Then the young man approached the gentleman's office and shouted that he had arrived. Immediately, a protective seal lit up beneath the door, meaning it was safe to enter. As soon as she entered, she immediately began to say that everything was just as the master wanted. That girl was already about to leave the castle because Elliot personally took care of this matter. The boy was more than sure that he had correctly understood her wishes and thought that she would praise him for it and promote him. But why lead now? The young man tries to strangle him. Already beginning to lose consciousness, the young man gasped for his master to forgive him and loosen his grip, after which Mr. Chenel hissed menacingly where Fani was at the moment. Crowley himself had ordered him to get rid of it so he could handle it himself. But the greatest wizard silently, with all his strength, hit him with his knee in the solar plexus, so hard that Elliot simply flew to the side like a rag doll, after which the boy shouted that he did not understand at all the reason for his anger, why he was so angry, because the young man did everything the master wanted. The young man muttered that he had asked him to take care of his girlfriend, and not the other way around. Elliot shouted, "What other bride?" He understood that this girl was a princess from the Eastern Kingdom, and the master could not throw her out so easily, so he asked to deal with her. Was Elliot wrong? Chenel wanted to choke on her just like every other woman, so how did she deserve such anger? At that very moment, the master, using his magical abilities, tore off the hand of the self-assured young man, after which the young man whistled that he had to immediately respond where Estefania was at that moment. The guy stammered and replied that he was in the room at the end of the east hallway. After Crowley heard the information he needed, he instantly disappeared. Elliot was left bewildered, wondering if he had made a mistake, and if this girl had been loved by the master all along. When Crowley materialized in our heroine's bedroom, he saw that she was lying there, completely exhausted and without strength, after which he immediately took her in his arms and moved to another place. When the girl came to after a while, she looked around and couldn't understand where she was at that moment. Estefania had never been there before and clearly remembers falling asleep in her room. When he returned to his bedroom, he fainted from hunger and woke up on the floor a couple of hours later. Then our heroine washed her hands of the blood that appeared during her cough. The last thing the girl remembers is that she fell exhausted onto the bed and fell asleep. And after that, she never woke up again. And how did Fanny get to these luxurious rooms? Yuchi suddenly appeared and immediately ran to hug our heroine. The boy cried and asked for forgiveness for his sin. The girl stroked his head and asked him what had happened. "I'm so sorry I didn't keep an eye on her, and Stephanie had to face that damn narcissist." Then he suddenly moved away from her and said that she must be very tired and fell on her with his whole body, after which he asked her how Fanny felt since the girl had slept for so long. Our heroine replied that everything was fine, that she was just very tired and nothing more. The baby exclaimed, "What does that mean?" She was just forced to live in a dirty closet for a whole week. She was barely fed, and she was not allowed to leave her room. This is not a joke at all. Estefania asked in surprise how he knew all this. The boy replied that the teacher told him everything. The night began by saying that she had now become his wife, and then told her all this. Yuchi told him that he should be the one to take care of her, but he was urgently called to the city by request, and Chenel was forced to entrust the guard to Elliot. However, no one could have imagined that the young man would keep her in such terrible conditions, and Mr. Crowley cruelly punished him for it. The girl thought to herself that everything was clear now, and at least she was very happy that the boy would now take care of her, after which she asked if he had moved her to that bedroom. The boy wanted to start explaining everything, but suddenly a man appeared. Then she turned to him and exclaimed with joy that Stephanie had finally come to her senses. Then he realized that it would probably be a nuisance, so he said he would go get breakfast and leave them a secret for now. Fanny immediately said that Yuchi told him everything. Apparently, he personally tidied up this room, but the one Elliot gave him was enough, so don't scold him. He then apologized for worrying everyone and said that he had prepared some medicine for him. But when the girl suddenly stood up and said that she would now go to her room and bring him back, she suddenly felt sick and very dizzy. To prevent her from falling to the ground, the young man managed to catch her. Hearing the wonderful aroma emanating from it, our heroine wondered what that wonderful smell was. Perfume or conditioner for washing. She had never heard anything like it, and nothing could compare to it. Then he suddenly came to his senses, thought about what he was doing, and exclaimed that he was asking for forgiveness, that he did not want to touch him intentionally, that it would not happen again. But the guy pushed her hard so that she would lie back down on the bed. The girl began to get up and complain about her medicine. The gentleman covered her mouth with his hand and asked if she could remain silent for at least a while, after which he sat down beside her and asked her what she thought, how a girl could allow a servant to treat her so roughly. Fanny objected that Elliot also brought her food and water every day, and that she felt so bad not because of his actions, but simply because her health was failing. When the young man addressed her by name, our heroine noticed that this was the first time he did so. In the original story, the guy never called people by their names. He had no need to do so. He simply didn't remember the names of the people around him. But he only remembered the name once when he met Angelica, and was amazed by her beauty. Suddenly, Chenel hissed that this was simply disgusting. His politeness and self-deprecation were incredibly annoying. What was he trying to achieve by treating himself like this? The girl began to mumble something unintelligible and ask for forgiveness. Crowley shouted that he was her fiancé and let Fanny communicate with him as an equal, who raised her head and spoke clearly. Otherwise, she would not be able to understand his feelings. She is used to always putting herself below others for her own safety, but with him, she doesn't have to do that. Our heroine thought she had fallen in love with the knight because he had always been a very kind person. Then he tucked her hair behind her ear and told her to remember that she was obliged to always talk to him no matter what happened, whether she was sick, sad, or happy, whether she liked something or not, because Estefania was his fiancé. Suddenly, a boy burst into the bedroom, saying that he had brought breakfast, and found the scene awkward. Yuchi immediately started saying that he had apparently disturbed them, and that he would come a little later, but the girl tried to stop him. After a while, the baby was already eating his porridge with a spoon. Our heroine exclaimed that she couldn't eat so much. The boy looked at her with puppy eyes and said that she had put a lot of effort into making this breakfast, so how could she not like it? Estefania realized that her charm simply blinded her eyes. But how can she eat in peace if her master literally burns her with his gaze? Yuchi guessed this and said that the master was embarrassing her, so she should leave. After these words, the young man immediately disappeared from the room. Our heroine was outraged by what she had just done, but the baby told her not to be nervous and to eat. When the girl finished eating, the boy asked her if she knew why he couldn't cure his fatigue with magic. Estefania replied that she needed to think a little, and to herself, she began to reflect that it seemed like the novel described the reason for this, but she didn't remember anything at all. Yuchi exclaimed that in that case, he would now explain everything to her, and they would start from the basics. Every person's body contains magical power in their world. People whose volume of magic exceeds the permissible limits are called magicians. The amount of magic each person has is an innate trait like the color of a baby's eyes. So from a very early age it is possible to determine whether a child will become a wizard. But now the time has come for sudden questions. If a baby was born with a magical norm, what is the probability that when he grows up, he will become a wizard? Our heroine thought for a moment and replied 30%. The boy replied that no, there was no way that a magical Norman could never become a wizard. Norma will never be able to become a magician. Not even the full moon will help them. And if they try to artificially increase their magical power, there is a high risk of death. And when using healing magic, the magician directs his magical power towards another person. Fani continued saying that if the volume of this patient's power is less than that of the magician, then he will be in danger of death. Therefore, no type of magic can be used under normal conditions. The boy exclaimed that she was an intelligent girl and that she understood everything perfectly. Our heroine replied that it was all because he was simply a wonderful teacher. If before arriving at the Central Lands, she knew clearly that no magic could cure her, then she no longer hoped to be cured of her illness. All she wanted was to meet Mr. Chenel, after which the girl asked why Yuchi had started this conversation. The boy replied that when he was in his room, he noticed something. There was a bucket of water in the corner, and all the liquid was blood red. With the help of a magical analysis, the baby realized that it was his blood. Our heroine is clearly trying her hardest to hide something from them. She's not hurt, so where did the blood come from? Estefania thought that she couldn't tell the truth about her illness, so she would have to lie. That's why she replied that she didn't want to say it, but because of the feeling of hunger, she felt so dizzy that she fell and slightly hurt her neck. The girl immediately started bleeding, so Fani cleaned everything up and washed her hair. The boy exclaimed in horror that he could have hurt his head and that he should let him examine it immediately. Our heroine immediately said that the wound had already healed and that there was no need to worry so much. Yuchi shouted that how could he calm down now that he knew she had a bruise on her head. The girl told herself that she seemed to have made things worse, but she said out loud that everything was fine and that nothing hurt, so she shouldn't worry. The boy replied that if it was really like that, then it was fine. As he had said before, they wizards cannot heal wounds according to magical rules. That's why she asks him a lot, that if something hurts him, he lets her talk about it immediately. Yuchi will make sure that she is examined by a good doctor. Our heroine said that she would like to ask him something, why he was so kind to her since their first meeting. The boy replied that it was because Fani was very inspiring. Estefania asked in what sense since she had not done any of that. After that, the baby just looked at her silently, with the kindest smile she had ever seen. Our heroine never knew what he meant, but for some reason, that smile suddenly made her soul feel warm and calm. After a while, Yuchi brought her a beautiful dress and exclaimed that she needed new clothes. It is enchanted, so that its size can be adjusted to the person wearing it if they want to try it on. The girl noticed that it was very beautiful and asked if she could really take it. The baby replied that of course it was made especially for her. Fani asked if it was the boy who sewed it, but he replied no, that in his castle lived a sorceress who sewed clothes for everyone. Our heroine was shocked, because she didn't even know such magic existed. Then she felt a little embarrassed and asked me to convey her gratitude to that girl. Yuchi added that it was indeed the master who ordered the sorceress to create this shirt, and it was also he who brought her to these chambers. The girl was baffled by the information she heard and asked if it was really him who found her in the room. The boy replied that the gentleman personally interrogated Elliot and forced her to tell him where she was, and then immediately went to her bedroom as he could not allow his beloved girlfriend to suffer. Estefania responded that the word loved is not entirely correct. She and Chenel have a completely different relationship. The boy asked in surprise that they did not love each other. Our heroine said that before jumping to conclusions, I should tell her how the teacher introduced her. The boy replied that he hadn't really said anything. He had simply said that from that day on, she was his girlfriend, and that now Yuchi had to take care of her. The girl realized that Crowley had again not explained anything to his subordinates, but that was of no importance. They all misinterpret their relationship, how she will leave the gentleman after a few months. If the young man does not dedicate all the details to them, she simply needs to talk about this with the baby. Our heroine decided that she would try to explain everything to him while she had the chance. But unexpectedly, with the help of magical abilities, the boy dressed her in the dress he brought. After which she said that all this was, of course, very interesting, but that they would discuss everything in detail when she had fully recovered. When he was about to leave, the girl grabbed him by the cloak and said, "Wait!" Yuchi asked what was happening. Maybe something was wrong. Estefania thought to herself that even though she had been placed in a better room, she was still afraid of being alone, so she tried to find the words to explain everything properly. But the boy himself asked her if she was worried about the red eyes she saw in the window. Fanny replied that even though she had only seen them once at night, she still couldn't get that image out of her head, and that's why she couldn't sleep peacefully. When the boy thoughtfully replied that he had understood everything, the girl asked him if he knew who it could be. Yuchi replied that he knew who he was, but to find him, they would have to wait until night. And right now, our heroine needs to sleep and gain strength. After touching it with her finger, the girl fell asleep instantly. Finally, the baby told her to sleep peacefully and have the warmest dreams. When the girl opened her eyes late at night, she saw a gentleman sitting on the edge of her bed. Noticing that she had already woken up, the young man took her in his arms and told her it was time to get up. Then the young man and she simply flew out the window and floated in the air. After telling her to look down, our heroine saw a whole group of wizards. There he saw a huge animal that looked like a snow-white fox with red eyes. Chenel said the boy told him he met him at the castle. He was a familiar. Some wizards invoked him to help them in battle and in everyday life. Estefania noticed that it was now clear who she saw at night, and it turned out not to be so scary. As soon as the young man showed him what scared him so much, the fear immediately disappeared. The boy must have asked him for help to overcome it. Our heroine approached the young man's face and thanked him for showing her this. Then Estefania realized that she had just touched Chenel's lips with her own, after which he immediately began to apologize and say that he hadn't meant to, and that he was very sorry. Our heroine only now realized how close they were to each other. She wanted to tell him that it was time for them to come down, but she saw from his expression that the young man was in great pain. But it was not her fault. The girl completely forgot that today is a full moon, and this is the day that Mr. Crowley hates. They immediately moved to the bedroom, and our heroine realized that this was her room. The young man felt very ill and was suffering from convulsions. Fanny realized that it was because the moonlight fell on him that the mana in the master's body began to go out of control, and it was all because of her. Our heroine was very scared, and to dispel her fear, the baby asked the teacher to show her that relative. Our heroine realized that she urgently needed to bring him the medicine she had prepared. Suddenly, the young man grabbed her by the dress in an attempt to stop her. Fanny said that she needed to bring him medicine and that it wouldn't take long for him to let her go since she wanted to help. But the young man simply snapped his fingers, and his suitcase appeared in the bedroom. Estefania immediately ran towards him and began to search for what she needed, after which he quickly gave the young man this medicine to drink to make him feel better. But Crowley couldn't even take a sip, and it all spilled out of his mouth. The girl prepared this potion for only 2 months. If the master does not take it now, she will remain in agony all night. Our heroine must do something because she can't let him suffer. She wanted to pour the medicine from her mouth to his mouth, but she doesn't think this will help open his jaw. What should she do in this situation? At the door, Fanny saw a boy who, smiling sarcastically, said that he had seen everything. Estefania immediately exclaimed that he had misunderstood everything and that she had no intention of doing anything. Yuchi said that the lovers wanted to have a private moment at night, under the full moon, and that it was very romantic, but the girl objected that it was not like that. Then he handed him a bottle, and told him that this medicine could ease the knight's suffering if he could help him drink it as soon as possible. The boy replied that in general, one should not use magic on the master during the full moon, but first he will drink it himself only a little, since otherwise he will not be able to help him. The girl replied that it was fine, but she couldn't understand how it was connected to Chenel. A moment later, he exclaimed that everything was ready, and Estefania saw that the young man immediately felt better. Our heroine breathed a sigh of relief, but thought that no one except the master should know about this medicine. The boy said that there was no need to worry so much. He already knew that she knew how to make a potion against Crowley's illness, since the knight had told him everything. After all, he was his main assistant, and no one else would know. The girl immediately calmed down and thanked Yuchi, then added that if he knew about the medicine, then he should know the truth about his relationship with Chenel. The boy asked in surprise, "What else is true? She is the master's girlfriend. What else should she know?" Our heroine gathered her thoughts and began to tell him everything. After hearing all this, Yuchi laughed out loud and said that it was now clear why she had been so evasive this morning. Estefania said that the man simply does not tell or explain anything to anyone, and that is why it happened like this. The boy said that all this meant that she would be under his protection for 2 months, so if she needed anything, she just had to tell him. Then he exclaimed that he wanted to show her something, and to do so they would have to fly to the roof of the castle. She would be very happy with what she would see. The boy didn't really explain anything to her, so she just had to follow him. There, he saw Elliot tied to the top of the tower, sobbing loudly and screaming that he was wrong and that he should be forgiven. Our heroine asked in surprise if this was really what he wanted to show her. The baby said he took revenge on his attacker and got what he deserved. Estefania asked him carefully if he had gone too far. Yuchi replied that he had decided to go against the master's will and had hurt his girlfriend, and he felt that Elliot deserved an even greater punishment. The boy burst into tears because he wanted the best. He thought the knight was eager to get rid of her like other women, but he couldn't even imagine that she was so important to him. After these words, the boy pressed the button, and a fist with a boxing glove automatically hit him in the face. He then added that Elliot did not understand anything at all. The boy gave him the opportunity to apologize to his guest, but he lost his only chance of salvation. The girl told herself that it was better not to anger that boy. Yuchi said that although this hard-headed narcissist was punished by her, she probably wants to get revenge on him herself. So let him take this thing, press the button, and the glove will hit him with full force. Fani immediately started making excuses and saying that she wasn't anxious, that he already looked pretty beat up, and looking at him she wasn't angry at all. The little boy first asked if she was sure, but then said that he would remain hanging at the top of the tower for a couple more days. The girl giggled nervously and thought that this sweet boy turned out to be even scarier than the knight. A moment later, they were back in our heroine's bedroom. Yuchi said that he was about to leave the continent and would like to do something as a farewell, since there were only 2 months left. Estefania replied that in reality, she and the gentleman had already done a lot for her, so asking them for more would be rude. The boy exclaimed that he had promised to do everything he could while taking care of her. Didn't he really want to have fun visiting a beautiful place? They would do anything, Fani asked. Our heroine began to think that if she thought about it, within 2 months, the day of her death would come. 572. He didn't even think about what he would like other than meeting Mr. Chenel. But then he remembered something and said he had a wish. The next day, they brought the boy a cake, and he asked what it was, and the boy exclaimed that they had been baking it for 3 hours. The girl prepared all this herself. Let her try it soon. The boy looked intently at the cake, after which a flame appeared in his hand. The boy immediately grabbed it and exclaimed, "What was he doing? Was he really going to burn it?" The teacher asked him what he was thinking. The boy shouted that they had brought that cake for him to eat and not to burn. The girl told herself that she had thought Crowley wouldn't want to try her food. In her past life, our heroine dreamed of becoming a pastry chef. So when I talked to Yuchi yesterday, I told him I wanted to make a cake, but it must be quite difficult and expensive to get the ingredients, so if they couldn't make it, it was no problem. The master's right-hand man exclaimed that there was no problem, and that he would definitely find everything she needed. After which, he asked her if she had cooked them before. Our heroine replied yes, but not as often as she would like, although she really loves the cooking process. In her past life, Estefania had a sweet tooth and delighted in the variety of cakes and pies that people created. For this reason, she even entered university to study pastry making, but she died without finishing her studies, and in general, none of her relatives liked sweets, so they did not support her hobby. But there are people in this world who would like to treat themselves to their baked goods. The boy asked her if he could try her candy. The girl replied that of course she would be very happy if he ate it. Chenel will test them. Yuchi exclaimed that he didn't even know, because he had never seen the guy eat anything sweet. In fact, Fani knew that the teacher had the same taste for sweets as her, although there was no hint of it in the main story. But the author wrote about his addiction to sweets on social media. And if the creator of the work himself spoke about it, then it means that it is the pure truth. The boy exclaimed that since she would personally prepare the sweets, Crowley simply couldn't refuse her. However, the next day, Chenel did not want to try even a piece. Perhaps if this fact was not written in the work, then it has no importance. Still, this was the usual information of the author after the publication of the novel. Even the main character did not know about his love for cakes. Even if it is true, it is unlikely that the knight would reveal his passions to an ordinary stranger. The boy asked disappointedly that he wouldn't even try the cake. Estefania thought to herself that maybe she had wanted too much. There was no point in forcing him to eat. It would be better to just leave. But the boy asked if he was sure that the girl had worked so hard to make that cake in order to please the master. Our heroine was baffled by what she heard and thought, why did he mention that? Yuchi turned to Fani and asked if the master could eat if he didn't want to. She replied, of course. Then he grabbed her by the hand, dragged her with him, and told her that they had to go to the kitchen so he could make them some tea. But suddenly, our heroine felt that she could not move at all. Looking down, he saw a glowing formation beneath his feet. It was the young man who told the boy to put it back in its place. The boy pretended to be stupid and asked what exactly needed to be put back in its place. Mr. Chenel did not respond and began to remain silent, staring at him. Yuchi exclaimed, "It's okay, God be with him," and put the cake back in its place. Then the boy began to walk away from the office with an angry look. The little girl was taken aback to see that he actually wanted the little girl to leave the cake where it was. Apparently, she should leave now, too. But then, he saw the magician break off a piece and eat it immediately. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. After which, he asked her if she liked the taste of Chenel, because she had tried it. The young man replied that it was very good, that he had done everything well. Estefania was surprised that her favorite character was eating food that she personally prepared. And she liked it. Maybe it was a dream. When the boy asked her if she had really done it herself, the girl exclaimed yes, but the baby helped her a little. Then she said that she would like to ask him for permission from that day on to cook in the kitchen and sometimes invite him to sweets. The young man replied that he was not at all against it, since she had done well. Our heroine thanked her and remarked to herself that she had succeeded in pleasing Mr. Crowley himself. But she won't be able to cook him many times before she dies. And seeing how Fani eats, she thought that she loved him very much. That's why she asked him if she could express her feelings during their encounters. She had a great desire to share tenderness with the man she loved with all her heart. The young man asked in surprise what it meant to express feelings. Our heroine answered that in the literal sense of the word, but if it is unpleasant for him, then of course she will not force him. Chenel replied that if she wanted it so much, then why not, was nothing compared to how she shamelessly stole his first kiss. Fanny exclaimed that she never intended to do this and regretted what happened and swore that it would never happen again. They can enter into a marriage contract under which she will be obliged not to touch him under any circumstances. But the young man replied that he did not care and that they would manage without any agreement, especially since it would not last long. Stephanie thought to herself that he was right. It would take longer to conclude the marriage contract than it would take her within the walls of this castle, since their relationship would only last 2 months. All these requests, the contract for her stay here, everything at first was beneficial only to her. She was lucky that the master allowed her to stay. Therefore, she replied that he was right, so she would try to keep her distance from him and not cause him any inconvenience and let the boy forget about his selfish request. She thought to herself that he would hardly believe her, but she no longer felt like burning with shame, so she said out loud that in that case she would go. Finally, he added that he had completely forgotten to tell her that he had been in bed for several days because of the full moon, and that he was glad that she was feeling better now. When she had already started to head towards the front door, the young man called her. Our heroine realized that he was calling her by her name again. Turning around, the girl saw that the knight was standing right next to her, after which he carefully asked if the young man wanted to tell him something. The young man said that in a week he would go to the northern lands, and Fanny would go with him. The girl replied that she was not against it at all. But why did he need her there? Chenel exclaimed that he should ask that scoundrel and disappeared from the office. After a while, Yuchi explained that the master had received an invitation to the coronation of the new ruler of the northern lands. Recently, the king and the first prince had passed away unexpectedly, and now the second prince would ascend to the throne. Realizing that he had no idea what was going on, the boy said that the knight himself should have explained everything to him. Our heroine laughed and asked why the boy agreed to go to the coronation. He seemed uncomfortable in such places. The boy explained that there would be royalty from all over the continent, so it was no surprise that the teacher was invited. And after all that, there would be a festive evening. Estefania now understood why the gentleman would take her with him that night. If he was alone, then no lady would miss the opportunity to attract his attention. But if there is a girl present there, the young man will be able to spend his time in peace. Our heroine muttered that she would be able to cope with all of this. The little girl exclaimed that this was a normal reception, that they let her relax and enjoy, that they transfer all those worries to Chenel, and that she can have fun alone. Fanny replied that she was right, and that it would be hard for him if she got under his feet. Yuchi then said that the important thing for such an event was that he needed an appropriate outfit. The girl replied that she had nothing of the sort, but the boy laughed and exclaimed that there was no problem, the dress would be his business, after which he approached her and told her that they would go to the magic studio right now. Upon opening the doors, the little boy immediately greeted everyone present. When the green-haired youth asked who the girl next to him was, Yuchi replied that she was the master's girlfriend. The young man was bewildered by the information he heard and exclaimed that the knight had really gotten married. How long had he slept? Was this not a joke? Then he grabbed his head and said that since he said that it must be true, the young man was completely out of touch with reality and had not even heard such important news. After which he quickly grabbed a pen and said he just had to write it down. The boy grabbed our heroine by the hand and said that it was better to leave this weirdo alone and get back to the main thing. After taking it to the girl, Yuchi said that her name was Lucy and that she was a magical seamstress. In the original story, this girl sewed all of Angelica's dresses because she had absolutely no money. She is a quiet girl who opens up to the main character as the story progresses. They had a mother-daughter relationship, and Fanny really enjoyed reading about their relationship. The little girl realized that Lucy was 100 times cuter than she imagined. Yuchi is, of course, also a cutie, but he has a completely different level of cuteness. After which he leaned towards her, told her it was a pleasure to meet her, and introduced himself. The girl sewed him a shirt. He liked it very much, and thanked him very much for it. The girl just silently looked at our heroine and did not answer. The boy said that Lucy is not a very sociable girl, so there is no need to be offended by her. After which, he turned to the seamstress and told her that he had come to ask her for something. A week later, Fanny and the teacher are going to an important reception, and they need her to sew for her, but he doesn't have time to finish because he hears a shout from behind that everything is ready. Our heroine realized that this guy said he needed to make an album about her and Mr. Chenel. So this young man took everything he had written and attached it to the dove, after which he released the bird out of the window and exclaimed, "Let the dove fly!" Our heroine asked in surprise what he was doing and why. The boy was speechless because he did not know how to express it, and he asked for forgiveness. If you asked her what she wanted to change in her life, Fanny would answer without hesitation that she had to stop an eccentric magician. But at that time, our heroine had no idea what news would spread everywhere. This news even reached his younger sister, and she found out everything. It was written there that the ruler of the Central Lands, Chenel Crowley, was engaged to an exiled princess from an eastern country. Immediately after the engagement, she began to live in his castle, which only proves his serious intentions. Now the Central Lands have a ruler, and perhaps an heir will be born in the near future. Angelica became angry, crumpled the paper, and exclaimed that she had really run away to marry the ruler of the Central Lands. How was that possible? Mom tried to calm her down and told her that if she was so nervous, it could only get worse. The girl screamed that she hadn't gotten worse in many years, and why she wasn't angry with her at all. The eldest abandoned them, leaving them only a terrible farewell letter. She also didn't give them any money, and because of her, they were forced to die of hunger. She also dared to steal her best dresses. Why is everything so unfair? Instead of Estefania living a better life than hers forever, while taking everything from the younger one, the woman said that there was no need to be so angry with her, and that it was probably because of her that she did that. On the eve of her departure, she allowed herself to be too rude to herself and her feelings. Apparently, this hurt her older sister a lot, and she decided to leave because the girl knows that Estefania is not capable of staying angry with them for a long time, so she will return home very soon. Angelica whispered that the newspaper said she was engaged to Crowley. Mom said he was a cruel tyrant who lived alone most of his life. The woman believes that all of these are just rumors. The older sister has never met him and could never be attracted to a man like him. Having calmed down, the girl said that she was indeed right, and that it was simply impossible that Stephanie would return soon anyway. Meanwhile, the green-haired boy exclaimed that it had been a long time since he had had a feeling like that, and thanked the young woman. After reading all this, our heroine was in complete shock and didn't even know how to react. The boy exclaimed that, as expected of a scribe, he had scribbled the article very quickly. The young man replied that such intense sensations should be spread as quickly as possible. He spread the good news and is responsible for a newspaper that is read throughout the continent. Estefania was completely horrified, because now not only the central lands knew of her engagement, but also the eastern ones. The main problem was that now Mom and Angelica will see this news. It's just some kind of nightmare now. Absolutely everyone knows about her with Mr. Chenel. Then the boy remembered that he needed to introduce himself and said that his name was Piss, and that he was in charge of spreading information. That was his hobby. That was why the master ordered her to spread the news throughout the continent. So if she needed to get fresh data, then she should definitely contact him. Our heroine asked him how he knew she was an exiled princess from an eastern country, since Fani had not even introduced herself to him. The young man replied that my lady underestimated his ability to obtain any information from anywhere. But overall, she has a lot of questions for herself. How she met the teacher, who was the first to confess his feelings to her, how he reacted to her background, how often they spend time together, who proposed the engagement. Yuchi lost his temper and yelled at him to immediately leave the girl alone and not touch her. Sorry to Fani, and said that once Piss hears a new sensation, he can no longer be stopped. Just like recently, he simply wrote the news and sent it to everyone without asking anyone. The boy asked what was wrong with that. It wasn't any kind of secret, so he could ask Milady for more information about the relationship as much as he wanted. The boy replied that first, in order to write an interview with Master Piss's girlfriend, he had to ask the master himself whether he would approve of such a thing or not. The young man exclaimed that it would never be possible to reach an agreement with him, but perhaps it would be possible with his beloved. Yuchi became angry and said that it was enough that they came to talk to the seamstress to let her continue doing her job and to stop spreading unnecessary information to people. Hearing this, the young man immediately apologized and walked away. After this, the boy turned to Lucia and asked her if she could sew a dress for Estefania. Then he looked at her attentively and said that the girl wanted to take measurements of our heroine, after which he pushed her away and told her to follow him, and that he would wait in the meantime. Throughout the entire process, the baby did not utter a word, but even during the romance with Angelica, she did not begin to speak immediately. After a while, the girl said that everything was ready and walked away. Estefania noted that she has such a smooth and silky voice that she couldn't even imagine what it could sound like. It's simply the best thing that happened to her all day. Suddenly, the girl turned to her and told her that she had a very interesting smell, got Lucy, and then asked what it smelled like. Unexpectedly, the sweet girl replied that she smelled like rotting corpses. The girl did not expect such a turn of events, and, stupefied, asked what he was talking about. But the girl didn't answer, but simply turned around and started to leave. Fani thought to herself that she knew she didn't have much time left. The girl wanted to stop her, but suddenly she heard a noise in the next room. It was Magdalena, who shoved a newspaper in Piss's face and asked him what it was. How could Mr. Crowley be involved? What kind of nonsense did he write? The boy replied that it was true, and Yuchi told him, and the boy never lies. He immediately turned to the baby and told him to take the trouble to explain to him what all this meant. The master's right-hand man replied that he had no intention and did not need to explain anything to him. Then he saw Stephanie at the door and immediately ran up to her, asking if they were done yet. And if so, then it was time to get ready for the reception. But Lively materialized before him and asked if she was the same exiled princess from the east. Without waiting for an answer, the girl declared that this was nonsense. Chenel would never have chosen such an ugly woman as a wife. Then he exclaimed that he had guessed everything, that he had bribed Piz to write that nonsense. As expected from the princess of an eastern country, the apple does not fall far from the tree. The Eastern royal family is famous for its love of luxurious living. There is a huge gap between rich and poor, and because of this, many people leave. Helps Crowley to be able to change his country and become the new ruler. However, the girl is only right about one thing. She married the wizard only for her selfish desires. But her words to him were absolutely sincere, so the girl will not allow anyone to think otherwise. Estefania was scared to death of Magdalena, but she had nothing to lose anyway. So she declared, and what difference did it make to her, whether the master was engaged to someone or not? If she did not believe that Fani was his fiancé, then she should go and ask him herself. Although the girl does not think that he is going to explain himself to a place empty for him, our heroine realized she was doing a very bad job of playing a villain. But since he's already started it anyway, he'll go all the way and put her in her place. After which he muttered that Lively must simply be in love with Mr. Chenel. But what a pity Magdalena arrived late, and now belongs to Estefania. She thought to herself that since she was his fiancée, she had to prove to everyone how much she loved him. No bully could weaken her feelings for him. The girl lost her temper, started calling her obscene names, and waved her arm to hit her. Yuchi stopped her with magic and shouted that she was crossing the line. The girl shouted that she should have paid him too. The boy replied that even if he started explaining to a fool like her why he supported Fani, she still wouldn't be able to understand anything. Magdalena began to yell at the boy to let her go immediately and tried to free herself from her shackles. Waving his hands with long, sharp nails, he hit our heroine on the cheek and scratched her. Seeing this, Yuchi lost his temper and shouted, "How dare he touch Estefania with his dirty hands?" Lively asked him what he was doing. If the baby didn't loosen his grip, then his hand would simply explode and he would complain to the teacher. The boy whispered to her that she should try to escape from him alive. Our heroine told herself that she had never seen him so angry. Piz entered the argument and said that if they didn't calm down right now, he would spread their dirty little secrets all over the kingdom, since there were disagreements between them, and it was the master who could answer who he was to Milady. So the young man wasted no time and immediately began shouting loudly that Estefania wanted to see the teacher. The girl thought to herself, "What is going on?" Because he would never in his life fall for something like that. But the greatest wizard immediately appeared and asked what had happened. The girl immediately ran to complain about Yuchi and say that that little thing almost tore her arm off with its magic. But the young man ignored her and immediately approached the girl to ask her where she had gotten the scratch on her face. Fani didn't know what to do in this situation. If she told the truth, she would simply kill Lively, and if she lied, she would make him even angrier. But the boy immediately shouted that Magdalena had hit our heroine. The girl immediately began to deny it and say that she had not done any of that. When the young man looked at her with a withering gaze, Estefania realized that he was very evil and that he had to be stopped. Then he began to mentally address everyone present, but it seemed that no one was going to do it. He certainly doesn't like this arrogant girl, but he can't allow the master to kill anyone. She then pressed herself against him and exclaimed that she didn't expect the boy to come, after which she thanked him for caring about her. But the situation wasn't worth it, as she was fine, but thought to herself that she just wanted to die from the increasing discomfort. Meanwhile, Magdalena whispered that she would still answer for everything and pay for it, after which the girl turned around abruptly and began to walk away. While our heroine thought that, thank God, everything had passed her by, the young man took her in his arms, after which he sat her on the sofa and ordered his subordinates to bring the first aid kit. The boys wondered if they really had it, or maybe they had something similar stored in the basement. The boy said that he would never in his life go down to that forgotten place, unless Piss went with him. Our heroine exclaimed that there was no need to worry so much, because it was just a common scratch. Then he noticed Mr. Chenel's gaze and even got scared. That's why he quickly corrected himself and said that he only trusted them. Yuchi exclaimed that this was great, that they would be back very soon. Already in the hallway, Piss said that the boy was right. After all, the boy replied that he had said that they were engaged. The young man said he had even begun to doubt whether he had written a credible article, but now wanted to know more details about their relationship. Then the little girl turned to Lucia and told her that after they finished taking measurements, Estefania came out scared by what had happened there. But the girl, as usual, remained silent and said absolutely nothing in response. Yuchi added that she is a very kind and good lady, so he shouldn't offend her. Piss took her hand and told her to be really nice to her, after which she added that they needed to find the first aid kit that the teacher had asked for. It was very interesting what they were talking about now. The boy said that he shouldn't even think about eavesdropping, but the boy objected that he himself wasn't curious. Yuchi replied that he thought the gentleman was just awkwardly flirting with his girlfriend. When everyone present left, leaving her alone with the gentleman, perhaps because of her nerves, she clearly felt a wild tiredness invade her body. But the girl decided that she should not show him that something was wrong with her. As soon as she said that she was a little tired and would like to rest, the young man immediately rested his head on her lap. Our heroine couldn't even imagine that Chenel would allow someone to lie on his legs. Then the young man told Stephanie to extend her left hand, after which he suddenly put on her finger a wedding ring of incredible beauty. Mr. Crowley's eyes. The greatest wizard said that it has protective spells, so he should always carry it with him. This is the first time someone has given Fanny a gift that she can use to protect herself. But it is not surprising because she is the norm among wizards, like a lamb surrounded by wolves. That's probably why the doctor said it wasn't safe for her to go there, as there was nothing an ordinary girl could do in the Heartlands. But Fanny arrived for a very short time, so no matter exactly where she went, the ending would be the same for her. And ultimately, our heroine just wanted to spend this time with Mr. Chenel. After which, he thanked the young man for such a wonderful gift that he would treasure greatly. The young man replied that everything was fine and that she should go back to bed. But our heroine objected that, thanks to his gift, she already felt much better. He then asked her if she could behave with him the same way as today, if other girls bothered him. The greatest wizard replied that he agreed and had absolutely nothing against it. Our heroine told herself that this was great, that he would not get angry, and that insolent girls could be put in their place. She exclaimed loudly that this was a good thing, and that she would now try to make sure that no one bullied her anymore. When suddenly the young man began to caress her cheek, Estefania could not understand what he was doing. The boy said that they needed to practice, because he wanted everyone to believe in their love, and no one would fall for his game if Fanny looked like a tomato in public. The girl couldn't believe her ears that he was the one who had suggested it, but she muttered out loud that she thought they could handle it without training. But the young man did not give up and said that it was still necessary to try. Our heroine tried to gather her thoughts because she simply needed to express her feelings to Chenel, as she always did. The girl asked forgiveness in advance for this freedom, then hugged the young man and told him, looking him directly in the eyes, that she loved him very much, after which he suddenly stepped back and exclaimed that he thought that was enough. After a long pause, Stephanie wondered why he remained silent and said nothing. But suddenly, someone started knocking loudly on the door, and our heroine jumped. A boy looked into the room and asked if he was bothering them. Chenel immediately walked past him silently and into the hallway. Yuchi pretended not to notice and said that they would examine his scratch now. When the girl adjusted her hair so that it was more comfortable, the baby saw a ring on her finger, after which the boy asked in surprise if it was an engagement ring. The girl exclaimed that that was not the case. Mr. Chenel simply gave it to her. The boy objected that the ring had been given to her by her boyfriend. Our heroine realized that she had completely forgotten that the novel described wedding rings as being worn on the left hand on the ring finger, but she understands that this gesture means nothing. After this, the boy added that now Estefania will definitely not get her way. Looking at the ring, Yuchi noticed that the master had chosen a rather rare one. Fanny replied that he had mentioned that it had protective magic. Was that rare? The boy looked at her mischievously and suggested that she check how everything worked. While the baby was saying that they were going to take care of her and go check on her, a very loud sound was heard. The little girl immediately said that there was no need to be nervous. Our heroine exclaimed, "How could we not worry about this?" Suddenly, something terrible happened. Yuchi replied that it was none of his business anyway. A white dove flew into the room and reported that the source of the explosion was a magic laboratory. Our heroine wondered if this was really Piss's voice. The boy replied that he had to go himself, but that he and the teacher's girlfriend were very busy. But when the young man reported that it seemed the labs had not been destroyed, the boy said he would still have to go to them. Then the boy turned to the girl and asked her if she wanted to go with him. When the boys entered the office, they saw a huge hole in the wall. The laboratory staff immediately began to complain that they did not want this at all, and that it all happened by accident. The magic laboratory is a place where magical instruments are created and researched. Apparently, during the experiments, something went wrong and exploded. Our heroine realized that magic is of course a destructive thing. The boy looked at them seriously and asked how many times during this month they had allowed themselves to do something like that. Yuchi understands that they didn't do it on purpose, but repeatedly asked them to be careful. The young people simply trembled with fear and said that he was absolutely right. When the boy said that he would have to report this incident to the teacher, the young men immediately fell on their knees and began begging him not to do it, to tell anyone but the teacher. The boy said that if they cleaned up there quickly, then maybe he wouldn't report it. However, this castle is now inhabited by Normas, and from this day on, they must be extremely careful in their investigations. Looking at the girl, the boys exclaimed that she really was the master's girlfriend. Our heroine realized that now, all the inhabitants of the castle knew who she was, so she would have to behave accordingly, after which she introduced herself and said that she was glad to meet them. Yuchi added that Chenel values his fiancée very much, and if she suffers because of his antics, then they can blame themselves. Then he decided to have compassion and said that if they understood everything, then this time he would fix the wall himself, although the boys should do it. The young people were very happy and exclaimed that he was the best, after which they gave him a huge thank you. After which the master's right hand went to work, and the wall before everyone's eyes slowly began to recover. Watching all this, the girl said to herself that it was simply incredible. When Yuchi finished everything, he said it was time for them to leave, and threatened that there would be no more explosions. The boys exclaimed that it was good that they had understood everything, and thanked Estefania for visiting them today. Already in the hallway, our heroine realized that something was wrong with the boy, and asked if everything was okay. The boy thoughtfully replied that he had some kind of bad feeling. Suddenly, the dove appeared again, declaring that something had happened in the main hall, and that it had to go do its job. The boy cried out in despair, "Why does he have to go through all this?" and told Estefania that it was time to leave. On the way, the little girl apologized and said that it seemed that they would not be able to test the power of her wedding ring today. When asked why, the boy replied that there was simply too much work. As Yuchi said, they didn't actually go to the training camp, but instead spent the whole day running around the castle doing errands. Standing at her bedside at night, the girl noticed that she was simply incredibly tired. It had been a long time since he had run around like that, and the boy didn't care. With all this work done every day, magicians are truly amazing people. Although Estefania was aware of her differences from the beginning, today she seemed to feel them fully. Unfortunately, she is a normal person and cannot keep up with his pace of life, and now she finally understands why the doctor was so worried about her. However, he couldn't even imagine that Mr. Chenel would give him something like that. It was worth being reborn just for this moment. As soon as he put on this ring, he felt his body become much lighter. As soon as our heroine took off the ring, she immediately felt sick and simply let it fall from her hands. Fanny barely reached the bed and simply fell on it. It seemed to her as if her whole life had flashed before her eyes. She was just in incredible pain, and it was like she realized her life was about to end. The girl felt very bad and scared. She wanted so much for someone to save her from those feelings, but that person simply does not exist. When Estefania felt better, she thought that she should not forget her destiny. Because of the intense pain, he couldn't close his eyes, but at least at that moment, it didn't hurt as much as it did at night. Then, Estefania noticed the wedding ring lying on the nightstand. Our heroine was very happy that everything was fine and remained intact. As soon as he put it in his hand, He felt as if all the pain had disappeared. If you remember yesterday afternoon, it was exactly when the girl took it off that all this came to mind. So Fani decided that it was no longer worth removing it, because otherwise the terrible pain would return again. But she needed to find out why it worked that way, and to do that, she needed to meet Yuchi. When they arrived together at a certain place, our heroine saw two wizards who were fighting each other with the help of magic power. The boy said that this was the magic training ground where young talents were trained, and that this floor was stronger than any other, and was the perfect place to test how his ring worked. The young man exclaimed that he was very happy to see the master's right-hand man, and that he never expected to find him in the company of a girl. Then he asked if the lady next to him was the master's girlfriend. The boy replied that if they knew each other, her name was Estefania. One of the girls exclaimed that she was simply a beauty, and that her master had very good taste. Another objected that he did not choose his beloved based on her beauty. Chenel, isn't that so? Why did they come? The boy took her hand and said that they had come to test the powers of this ring. Everyone present began to examine the jewel and noticed that it had been made by the master himself. It has protective charms, and it is very thoughtful of him. The knight clearly did it out of love for her. Yuchi then asked who wanted to see what the ring looked like in action. The young man immediately exclaimed that he would never in his life attack Crowley's girlfriend. The blue-haired girl also replied that she refused. The other smiled sweetly and also said she would prefer to watch from the side. The boy said that since no one wanted to, he would try to do it himself and stay a little further away. Noticing the frightened look of our heroine, she immediately said that there was no need to worry. The little girl was not going to use all her strength, but would use a simple spell. Estefania replied that it was fine and went where he told her. She was of course very scared, but she believed that the baby would not hurt her. The boy shouted that he was starting and released a stream of energy towards the girl. A protective field instantly appeared around our heroine, preventing the attack from happening. Then the magic power was reflected and flew back to the center. Yuchi immediately used a formation to prevent his own attack from hitting the baby. Fani immediately ran up to him and began to ask if he was okay. The boy replied that everything was fine. He just didn't expect the spell to fly towards him, after which she said that this shield not only protects her, but also strengthens any spell by turning it against the attacker. Our heroine realized that this was indeed a very valuable gift. She said out loud that even if Estefania attacked her, she would remain safe, all thanks to the master. Yuchi replied that if she was referring to Magdalena, she did not believe that the girl would dare to approach her now. When the girl asked why, the boy replied that yesterday the master had punished her appropriately. Our heroine asked if he had really treated her the same way he had treated Elliot. The boy replied that he didn't think it was that cruel, but that he clearly didn't like the punishment. Yesterday, the girl ran away from him all over the castle, but she couldn't hide. The young man caught up to her anyway and looked terrifying. The girl was completely horrified and screamed, asking why. What had she done to deserve such treatment? Today, Elliot appeared in her room and declared that she had apparently also experienced the master's wrath. The girl didn't like him, so she didn't understand what he wanted from her. The young man told her not to look at him so angrily, that he simply felt sorry for her, that they were in the same boat no matter how you looked at it. After which the young man demonstrated that he was missing an arm. So she was luckier than him, although he can usually put his hand back. However, he is in possession of this child, and Yuchi will not give it to him until he cleans up the entire castle properly. But in general, why did the little one start defending the usual rule, even though this is not at all typical of wizards? The boy is the best magician after the master, the only one who was recognized by Crowley. But it seems that he does not like managing the central lands at all, so Yuchi began to help him manage the castle. The girl who lost her leg screamed that, how could he endure all this? Because everyone was on his side. Was he really satisfied with the fact that some kind of rule was on the master's side? As he left the room, Elliot said goodbye, that if he valued his life, then he should not get involved with that girl. But Magdalena was not going to give in so easily, because she definitely had to get revenge on her, so she shouted, "No way!" Meanwhile, our heroine wondered if everything would be okay with Lively, but thought to herself that she didn't really care. But Chenel could be very cruel, and she wouldn't want it to look like she killed. The boy replied that everything would be okay, since she had only done something bad once. Estefania asked him what he meant by just once. Their conversation was interrupted by a young man who asked what they were chatting about. Yuchi replied that they were talking about a lady. The wise men immediately understood that they were talking about Magdalene. The boy exclaimed that all this time he was wondering why the master had cast a spell on the wedding ring, but now it became clear that it was all in order to protect her from that girl. The knight was very clever. He then patted the silent young man on the shoulder and said that if they had attacked Crowley's girlfriend, they would surely have died. The girls noticed that he now has a fiancé, and Lively will have to accept it. One of them exclaimed that to show his love and protect his beloved, he made such a wonderful ring. Chenel is so romantic. And yet our heroine did not understand why this ring affected her physical condition. There is no doubt that the spell on it is very strong. She needs to find out everything she can about him, but she must not eliminate him under any circumstances. Yuchi at that time said that that girl should have been punished for what she did yesterday, but he had absolutely no idea what was wrong with her at that time. The young man exclaimed that he had already managed to do something. And what time was it? When the baby replied that he was the first, everyone present became upset. Estefania said that the boy had mentioned it before. But what does the first time mean? The girl explained that each wizard in the tower has only one chance to offend the master, and after that, a terrible fate awaits him. Fanny noticed that everyone is very serious. Yuchi added that this really helps to discipline all the inhabitants of the castle. After all, the magician will not face death the second time. But from Elliot's experience, we can say with certainty that the punishment will definitely not be easy. Lively has only gotten away with a scare, but if she continues in the same spirit, she will be the one to blame. After all, she knows firsthand what happens to those who anger the teacher. Estefania reminded herself that everyone has the right to make mistakes. The girl noticed, however, that Magdalena lacked intelligence, so she had better be on her guard. In the original story, Lively was consumed by jealousy, so now our heroine faces it in its most terrifying form, so she has to be careful. Suddenly, a silent young man approached and said a phrase, "A magical request." The young man exclaimed that he had completely forgotten about it, and added that it was time for them to leave. When the boy asked what the request was this time, the children replied that it was to kill monsters. The master's right hand warned that in that case they should hurry, after which the boys flew up into the sky and said it was time to leave as time was running out. Beckoning to them, Yuchi said that these four were relatively normal types out of all the castle's inhabitants, so if he wasn't around, then he should turn to them for help. Fanny replied that it was fine. Then the boy added that it was time for them to return to the castle. On the way, our heroine said that she remembers that he said that requests are given to wizards, depending on the complexity and their strength if she receives any request. The boy replied that of course he often receives requests to evaluate and analyze things because he has a well-developed analytical magic. Estefania realized that it was now clear that thanks to her, he was able to discover that it was her blood that was in the bucket of water. Yuchi added that he cannot be called an ordinary magician, as he can notice the smallest details in everything around him. For example, these flowers. He can say who planted them here and when. A common magician would not be able to answer these questions, but for him it is as natural as breathing. The girl replied that it was simply incredible, but her magic could not see absolutely everything. The boy replied yes, there is also something he cannot analyze, after which he exclaimed, "Would you like to see how magical requests are carried out? One has just arrived, but it is true that it is for tomorrow," our heroine clarified, if she could definitely go with him. The boy replied that of course the trip to the northern lands would only be in a week, and she wanted to earn money. If she helped him with the request, then he would pay. Fanny thought to herself that of course she wanted to find a job, but not like this. But out loud, she replied that she didn't know how a rule could help a magician, but if Yuchi wanted it, she would gladly go with him. The boy exclaimed that they had now agreed to go on the mission tomorrow, after which he exclaimed that he had completely forgotten, because he still had errands to run at the castle, then asked if it would be okay if he left her. Estefania told her not to worry, that she didn't need to watch her, that if something happened, she would go to her room immediately. Plus she has a wedding ring from Mr. Chenel, the baby said happily, and then ran off to do his business. But in the end, he said that if anything happened, I should call him. The master's right hand remained standing and looked at our heroine, waiting for her to disappear from sight. after which he grabbed his flying machine and went somewhere. He found himself in the sky, above an unspecified country, and asked the master if he was investigating the migration of monsters and what progress there was overall. Without even turning to him, the young man asked what he was doing there. When Yuchi said that, as the caretaker of his castle, he was obliged to inform him about his fiancée, who was hiding something with great effort, the young man immediately turned around. The boy himself sees that she behaves strangely. Perhaps he noticed something in her behavior. But when the boy didn't answer, he said that he couldn't take care of her forever. The girl also needed his attention. The young man asked him why and what he needed this for. The boy exclaimed in surprise that he actually meant that he knew nothing. The powerful wizard did not understand what he was saying and asked the young man what he needed to know. Yuchi said that even the master himself doesn't know anything about his girlfriend. Chenel asked what he was talking about. The little one replied that it would be better for him to find out from his beloved, after which he quickly got ready and said it was time to return to the castle. Having flown some distance, the boy thought that apparently the teacher had not really noticed that something was wrong with Estefania. This morning, the gentleman's right-hand man visited the girl, knocked on her door, and asked if he could come in. She immediately went to him and wished him good morning. The boy asked her if she had slept well, and the girl replied that everything was fine. Yuchi noticed that the scratch on his cheek seemed to have completely healed, after which he looked at her closely and said that she had not really slept enough, and it was obvious as she even had dark circles under her eyes. Our heroine replied that yesterday was simply such a busy day that she did not have time to fully recover. The boy suggested that she rest all day, but she said it was not necessary. Then the boy wondered if he should have told the knight this. Meanwhile, our heroine, after saying goodbye to the boy, went to her room. But at the last moment, he realized that he had to talk to Lucy. If she really knew about her condition, then she could have told the master everything, although the baby apparently doesn't know anything yet, which means the girl didn't inform anyone. Walking down the hallway where the workshop was supposed to be, the girl accidentally ran into Magdalena. 976. Estefania was willing to meet anyone but her, but suddenly, the girl said that she was very happy to be able to meet her because she wanted to apologize for her behavior yesterday. She had simply acted in a disgusting manner. She said all sorts of nasty things and even hurt his beautiful face, after which Lively bowed and said she was truly sorry for what she had done. Our heroine looked at her in surprise and did not understand what kind of circus was happening. The girl continued saying that she herself must have realized that she really liked Crowley, but since his choice fell on her, Magdalena, on the contrary, wants to get to know the girl better. She swears that she will never interfere with her master over anything in her life again. Estefania wondered if she believed a single word he said. Was Chenel's punishment so severe that he changed his mind? Lively continued to stream and said that she had recently become his girlfriend. Apparently Fani was attracted to his looks and could not condemn his choice. But the girl has known the teacher for a long time and can tell a lot about him. The girl told herself that everything was clear, that nothing had changed, and that if Magdalena wanted to play with her, so be it. That's why I thanked her for her kindness and told her that I wasn't angry with her at all. On the contrary, thanks to this misunderstanding, she became much closer to Chenel, and thank you for this, Lively. After that incident, the master made this ring especially for her. She thought to herself that the ring on her left hand on the ring finger was sealed with strong magic, and that Crowley had put feelings into that little thing that a girl could only dream of. Magdalena looked at her hand in astonishment and could not even utter a word. Our heroine said that it was simply beautiful. The stone on this ring was the color of Mr. Chenel's eyes. She was very grateful to him for such a kind gesture. And yet the girl is right. Lively spends much more time with him than Fani, and will gladly listen to stories about him that come from her lips. Unfortunately, Estefania is an ordinary human, and therefore cannot understand the mind of a magician. But since she is his fiancée, she wants to know more about him if she can trust the lady. Magdalena replied that of course she would be happy to help her and tell her everything. Lively was the only daughter of the current king of the Western lands, and grew up in love and luxury, and was loved by all no matter how badly the girl behaved. Because of this, the girl grew up quite vain and cruel, taking no one into account. None of the wizards of the Central Lands could get along with her, and she did not change until her death. I know the whole plot of the play. You shouldn't expect any changes from it. You need to tell Yuchi about your conversation with Magdalena. But if we forget about her character, the girl is a true representative of a purebred aristocrat with a beautiful and well-groomed appearance, excellent style in clothes, as well as incredible skills in magic. Compared to her, our heroine is just a scruffy, ordinary girl. Estefania has done absolutely nothing to be a worthy bride for Mr. Crowley. He began to remember how his little sister asked him to buy her nail polish. Our heroine wearily replied that they had absolutely no money for this. Angelica exclaimed why the eldest had recently bought her such a pretty hair clip, and it cost so much more than the nail polish. Estefania replied that buying one bottle wouldn't be a problem, but knowing her, she would want to buy a bunch of different colors of nail polish. The girl asked why she had decided that, but the younger one said nothing. The girl replied that this was a fact, and that she believed she had absolutely nothing to refute it. Angelica immediately had tears in her eyes and said that her older sister was very rude. After thinking about it for a moment, Fani replied that it was okay, and that she would buy her some nail polish if the girl didn't say anything to her mother. The youngest immediately ran to hug Estefania and thank her for it, while our heroine thought to herself that she was always spending her hard-earned money on others. But now that she had the long-awaited freedom, the girl could buy herself something. Lucy and Piss appeared around the corner. The latter greeted Fani warmly, who asked him how long he had been standing there. The young man exclaimed that from the beginning, when Fani had just met Magdalena, he would never have thought that the girl would learn from her mistakes and even apologize to him, and this is something very surprising. Then the young man shouted loudly that if she had attacked him, they would definitely not have stepped aside, after which he asked her if she thought Lively was truly sorry for her actions. The girl replied that she really didn't think she had taught a lesson, but with this ring, Fani was no longer so afraid to talk to her. The young man immediately screamed when exactly the teacher handed it to him. Our heroine responded with fear that yesterday immediately after they left. Piss immediately exclaimed that he should have sent Yuchi alone to the warehouse. He knew he would miss something interesting. After the boy said it was time to get to work, the girl carefully asked him if he was really going to tell the entire continent about the ring he had given her. But the young man replied no, that he would distribute this exclusive only in the Central Lands. This ring only proves his current status. In his opinion, everyone should know about it. Our heroine asked him confusedly what he meant. Piss explained that knowing what kind of relationship she had with the teacher, no one would dare to attack her, for example. Estefania thought to herself that it doesn't work like that. She doesn't really understand what goes on in the minds of magicians. But for the moment, all this does not matter, since it is much more important to talk to the seamstress. So I asked her if she remembered saying yesterday that she had a really weird smell if the baby told anyone. Lucy said no. Estefania told herself that thank God she could not understand how the girl could have found out about her impending death. According to the plot of the novel, the girl does not treat anyone with hostility if she asks her not to tell this to anyone. She thinks Lucy should agree. Therefore, he said that he asks you very much not to tell this to anyone, especially Mr. Chenel. The little girl immediately remembered the boy's words, that Fani was a very kind and good girl, so there was no need to offend her. After which, Lucia replied that she was fine, and added that, at that moment, she did not perceive any smell of rotting corpse. Our heroine asked in surprise if this was really true. Piss heard all this, and stupefied, asked again what he had just said. Our heroine was afraid that he had already heard everything, and that she would be able to get out of the current situation if the young man found out about her illness, and he would tell the whole continent. The girl had not yet had time to say anything when the young man exclaimed that Lucy had spoken or that he had heard her wrong. This is just phenomenal. The girl had not communicated with anyone except him until this moment. After which he clarified what they had just talked about, because he had only heard his voice, not the content. Estefania thought that since he hadn't heard anything, she could lie, so she replied that he said it smelled good. If you think about it, this is partially false. They actually talked about her smell, although it's hard to call it a compliment. When she realized that the young man had fallen into the trap, she sighed with relief at having escaped without him. Yuchi heard a loud scream, which gave him a bad feeling. The boy ran to her and told her that thank God Fanny was with Piss and Lucy all this time. The girl replied that although she said she would stay in the room, she felt a little sad, so she decided to walk around the castle so that he would forgive her for that. The boy replied that he understood everything and asked him if he had ever gotten into any trouble. Our heroine began to mutter no, then tried to collect her thoughts and formulate a correct answer about Lively. But suddenly, a young man intervened and informed him that he had met Magdalena while walking around the castle. The boy started to get angry because as soon as he left the castle, just for a couple of hours, she started chasing Fanny again. Piss replied that she, of course, still mocks Stephanie, but the master's girlfriend proudly ignored all her provocations and even managed to put the devil in his place. Yuchi said that if this is really true, then he should still try to ignore it and not engage in dialogue once again. Although the girl has a ring from her master that can protect her, listening to his constant reproaches is simply unbearable. Estefania apologized for having worried her in vain, but the girl promised to share with her everything she knew about Mr. Chenel. The girl is right. It is better that she is not found again. However, as soon as Lively insults her affection for the master by exalting herself as the only woman who knows everything about him, our heroine simply falls into a rage. However, it cannot be argued that Magdalena knows Crowley better than she does, since the master she knows was only a character in a novel. At this moment, the girl is learning more and more new aspects of the strongest magician in the Central Lands and wants to know him completely. Noticing that our heroine was thinking about something, the guy immediately asked if there was a problem in their relationship. The boy replied that he had never asked the teacher about this, so he did not know. Piss whispered that it would be worth it to suddenly break the engagement because they barely communicate, and now Fanny is even willing to communicate with this harpy and to get to know Crowley better. He thinks they should help Estefania. Yuchi answers that he was right. The last thing he needed was for Magdalena to do anything else to him, so it was better to intervene. When the young men looked at her simultaneously, she felt scared for some reason, because she didn't understand why they were looking at her that way. The boy said that they decided to create a support group in honor of our heroine's love for the teacher. Piss added that they will help her reach the master's heart, and Lucy will also help her with this. The girl was in shock and completely stopped understanding what was happening. Our heroine pulled the boy towards her by the hand and asked him what they were planning. She had already told him that she simply admired Crowley and had no sympathy for him. The baby looked at her and told her that she was hiding her feelings for him. When Estefania asked him what he was talking about, the boy asked her if she didn't remember their first conversation. The boy asked her if by any chance she would like to marry the master, and Fanny replied no. At that moment, she didn't even suspect what she really felt for her master. There was no longer any need to hide her true feelings. So if they helped her, then she could stay and make Chenel fall in love with her. Our heroine replied that she did not understand why he assumed she loved Crowley, except for a feeling of admiration. Fanny felt nothing more for him. Yuchi asked him why he needed to get to know the master better, if it was really to be able to prepare sweets for him. He didn't understand anything at all. The girl thought to herself that Yuchi must have liked her so much that he even wanted her not to leave his castle, even after the 2 months that had been allotted to her. Of course, she was very happy, but there was no point in doing so. Unexpectedly, Piss said that how curious it is that the master's girlfriend does not love him. How suspicious it is. Becoming the master's wife without feeling love for him. Is she really with him just for personal benefit? Estefania did not understand what to do now. If the boy discovered that her marriage was fictitious, he would tell everyone, and if the wizards found out about her situation, it would be unsafe to stay in the castle. Suddenly, the boy came to the rescue and explained that the boy had misunderstood everything. The girl was simply afraid that the teacher would abandon her one day, so she did not allow herself to show her true feelings for him. Then, he turned to our heroine and asked if she had understood everything correctly. Fanny replied that to tell the truth, she had never heard words of love from Chenel, and that was why she began to worry that this marriage was simply an obstacle for him. The young man exclaimed that in that case they were definitely obliged to help Stephanie, because Crowley was sometimes very difficult to understand, after which he apologized for having made a mistake with her, but she can count on them. They will help her achieve the love of the master. The next day, while flying on a broomstick, the boy said that it was a good thing that everything had turned out that way. Our heroine replied that without him, she wouldn't have found a suitable excuse, so she thanks him for that. After all, she believes it is best not to spread the truth about her marriage to the master. Yuchi said that in any case, let them live in blissful ignorance. Each person has his own reaction and opinion about the truth. The less people know, the more peaceful their life will be. But after everything that happened, the baby now understands that it is better for her not to know all the details. The girl asked in surprise what he was talking about. The master's right-hand man exclaimed that none of that was important, but that what was important was the order they were going to fulfill today. His client was the owner of an antique shop in the Central Lands, and the goal is to evaluate the antiques. It will be necessary to restore order in your store. Estefania noticed that if he was from the Central Lands, then he was also a magician. The boy answered yes, but magicians can be both strong and weak, and even if a person can cast spells, this does not mean that he is capable of everything. That's why there are such magical requests, after which he exclaimed that they were almost there. Yuchi had finally arrived. The boy answered yes, but today he did not arrive alone, but with a friend. Finn said that she must be his master's fiancée, and he was very pleased to meet her, and then introduced himself. Our heroine replied that she was also happy to meet him, and said that her name was Stephanie. After all these kindnesses, the little girl announced that she would help him with his work that day. Suddenly, the old man became angry and shouted that there was no need to be stupid and force the master's girlfriend to work. It was simply unthinkable. The child could be said to be on his period. This is completely abnormal. Yuchi objected that everything is fine. The salesman continued to get nervous and said that if anything happened to his beloved, right after the baby was assigned to his care, Crowley would definitely kill them. Our heroine was shocked and did not understand what the meaning of being condescending was. The boy explained that last night Piss had sent a message to all the Central Lands again. The girl wondered if he had sent anything immediately after their conversation, and then asked what the message was about. The man explained that the master had appointed Yuchi as his personal protector. In other words, now a magician, who was equal in strength to Chenel, was protecting her. In other words, he had expressed his love for her with such a gesture. Although the young man cannot be with her all the time, now he will definitely always be safe. If even a hair falls from his head, the master will definitely punish everyone. Estefania thought to herself that this was some kind of nonsense. She didn't know why the boys thought that her protection was some kind of manifestation of love. Chenel was just trying to make her stay in the castle safe and comfortable. They have absolutely no future with him, because when the time comes, Angelica will appear on the scene. The boy said that in any case, he shouldn't worry so much. For example, Elliot and Magdalena threatened the life of his fiancée, and they were still alive. The old man replied that it didn't bother him at all, only that there were many things in his shop that could damage the norm, so it would be better for them to return to the castle. Yuchi became angry and exclaimed that he had already said that she would be fine. The master took charge of the safety of his beloved, after which he shouted for the girl to show him the ring. Our heroine was confused at first, but then reached her hand forward. When the man saw it, he exclaimed, "What a work of art that was! What a perfect magic chain, and what a powerful spell that elegant thing contained! This is just amazing. Could Stephanie lend him this ring for a while?" The boy apologized for him and said he was just an ordinary old fanatic of all things magical. Finn looked at this ring as if enchanted and said he would return it quickly. He just wanted to see this fabric and find out what it was capable of. Yuchi grabbed him by the arms and started to lead him out of the office, saying that he needed to go rest and that they would take care of everything themselves. He then led the girl into one of the offices and told her that her task for today was to put these books on the shelves so that they were all labeled so that she could find the one she needed. In any case, he will be in the next room and let him call if he needs help. Our heroine noticed that arranging books is not such a difficult task, so she will quickly accomplish it. When Estefania picked up one of the editions, she noticed that it was very old, and even the title had already faded. Then, by pure chance, it happened that he let go of it and let it fall to the ground. But when Fani bent down to pick it up, she saw that the book had opened to a page that read, "Research on Yuga's disease." The girl said that because of this illness, she only had a few months to live. Estefania remembered the words of the doctor, who said that in the Central Lands, there could be doctors who were developing a cure for this disease. Fani thought that maybe there was a way to heal written there, and began to look through it. But it turned out that absolutely all the pages of the publication were blank. So our heroine decided to check out some others and try to find the answer in them. Suddenly, a child's voice was heard asking what he was doing there. The girl apologized and said that she opened all those books, but they turned out to be empty. The boy replied that his pages were imbued with magic. In fact, the editions were not empty. It was just that someone, one might say, stole the letters from the pages, leaving them completely without text. Estefania asked in surprise why someone would do something like that. Yuchi replied that they couldn't figure out the reason, of course, but for some reason the person stole everything from these pages except their title. The boy said he could use his magic to find out exactly what had been done to them. Suddenly, a man appeared in the library and said that there was no need for that. All those books belonged to his former ruler. When our heroine asked who the ruler was, the boy murmured that his name was Rudolph Norris, his former master and therefore ruler of the Central Lands. Fanny noted that the novel did not reveal any information about Chenel's predecessors, so she knows nothing about him. After which I asked him why he needed this, and he did it not with just one book, but with all the books in that room. The man thoughtfully replied that he did not know all the reasons, but that he could guess them. All the masters were obsessed with the study of magic, and perhaps not all of them wanted to share their knowledge. Our heroine cautiously asked if her former ruler was still alive. When the little boy answered, of course, he asked if he lived in the Central Lands. Yuchi suspected something was wrong and asked her why she was so interested in him. Estefania replied that she was simply curious to know why he no longer rules the Central Lands. The boy replied that he was not in his country and that he could not say where that man was. Then the little boy's expression changed, and he said that, unfortunately, the division and the struggle for power did not concern him at all. Therefore, the best person to tell her about that moment is the knight. Yuchi believes that if she asks him, the boy will tell her everything. The girl told herself that if she thought about it, the baby was too small, and apparently that was why he had not witnessed the change of power in the Central Lands, and she had almost given herself away. The man said that if they were tired, would the children like to have tea with him? He had bought some delicious chocolates yesterday, and he was sure the lady would like them. Fanny objected that she hadn't done much of anything, so she wasn't tired. The baby was angry because she was again belittling his actions. Anyway, they were in no hurry, so they could go and rest. And while you drink tea, you will evaluate the magical instruments that you are sure you will like. Finn said that there was a lot of work in his shop, and he didn't expect their order to be fulfilled in one day, so they shouldn't worry. After a while, the boys were already resting and chatting pleasantly. Then, our heroine saw a lot of different magical things and was enchanted. There he found the same boxing glove that had been used to hit Elliot when he was tied up at the top of the tower. At night, Estefania was sitting on her bed and could not close her eyes because she was thinking about what she had learned that day. Rodolphon Norris is an ancient master and ruler of the Central Lands who studied Yuga's disease. If he could tell him about his research, then there might be a chance of a cure. Then she realized what she was thinking. She had already resigned herself and accepted the fact that she would die very soon. There was no place for her in the world of this novel. Even if you start looking for this person, your search may lead you to even greater disappointment. So what is the point of struggling if there is no chance of success? Suddenly, the teacher's voice appeared in his head, telling him to raise his head and speak clearly, otherwise he would not be able to understand his feelings. All our heroine needs is Mr. Chenel. She really wants to at least talk to him. When a young man suddenly appeared in the bedroom, Fanny asked him why he had come. The greatest wizard replied that she had called him, hadn't she? The girl was surprised that he listened to her, because he was just thinking about it. But if you think about it, the teacher always came to his call at any time. Estefania stated that it turns out that she can hear her voice. But I wonder at what distance. Chenel, no matter how far away he was, he would always listen to him. Suddenly, our heroine laughed, and the young man asked her what was funny. Fanny replied that it simply seemed like some kind of miracle, or rather, like her happiest dream. The boy leaned sharply towards her and asked what kind of dream it was, since he was right there in front of her. The girl jumped back in surprise and fell onto her pillows, after which she apologized. Crowley sighed deeply and lay down next to her. Estefania didn't understand why he did it. Then the young man asked him why he had called him. Our heroine was surprised that he actually lay down like that just to talk about it. The girl had no intention of actually talking to him, but now she had no choice. Fanny couldn't order her thoughts, because the only thing on her mind was that Mr. Chenel was lying next to her in bed. After which she murmured that she had never heard words of love from him. I thought, to be honest, I just wanted to spend the rest of my life by his side. Then he noticed that the young man was very surprised by what he had just said. She sat up abruptly and began to apologize, saying that was not why she had called him. When Crowley said he must speak, then the girl asked for time. Our heroine noticed that the young man was frowning a lot, and she didn't understand why. She then asked how she could learn to value and love herself, but thought that because of her lack of self-respect, she was creating many problems. The boy replied that a person is shaped by his past and became that way because of the events that happened previously. He first needs to rethink them. Estefania wondered what it meant to rethink. Perhaps she should remember those events in order to understand herself. He immediately began to remember that when he was 5 years old, he approached his mother and asked her to read him a book. The woman replied that she was already an adult and could read it perfectly herself. Angelica has just fallen asleep, and they can't make any noise so as not to disturb her peace. The girl replied angrily, "Okay." But she thought that she was the oldest, and her wishes would always be less important than those of the youngest. Then a memory came to mind of how Mom said that her and her sister's birthdays were coming up soon, and that they should give them the same gifts so that Angelica wouldn't be offended. The woman asked her if she was against it, and the 8-year-old girl replied that of course she was not. Estefania will be happy with any gift. If her little sister is happy, then she will be too. When our heroine was 12 years old, she asked her sister if the girl wanted stewed meat for dinner, since Fanny had not eaten it for a long time, and that's why she really wanted it. But the girl capriciously replied no, and that she wanted something light for dinner. Her younger sister's wishes always came before her own, and she was very used to it, so she would always put her own wishes on the back burner for the sake of others, and she still does. But living in this castle was her first wish, which she fulfilled on her own for the first time in her life. Stephanie finally did what she really wanted. The young man asked what was the reason for such a sudden change. The girl replied that she simply wanted to meet him. That was all. After which she leaned back on her pillow and added that she loved him very much. Suddenly, the young man put a pillow over her face and she exclaimed, "What are you doing? You can't see anything." After which she said that she needed to stop thinking so much. She just needed to act like she did when she came to this castle. If she has something she wants to accomplish, maybe go somewhere or at least get rid of someone. Estefania simply has to talk about it. Unfortunately, he is not telepathic and cannot understand her thoughts and feelings. So let her say what she wants to do, and Chenel will fulfill all her wishes. Fanny thanked him for his kindness and told him that he was not obliged to do so, since she could never repay him for his actions. She thought to herself that she was not worthy of these words, because the person for whom he would do this was not her, so she added out loud that he should promise something similar to his real wife. They are not a real couple, so let's let Crowley interpret his words correctly. Noticing the young man's strange look, the girl couldn't understand why he was looking at her like that. After which, she asked if she had completely forgotten why the young man had agreed to make the deal with her in the first place. Our heroine replied that she remembered everything the knight wanted to avoid female attention. Chenel then asked why Fanny was telling him something like that. Estefania realized that, according to the plot, he still couldn't stand women, so his words sounded like complete nonsense. Then she immediately began to apologize for what she had just said. The boy asked her to think twice before saying anything, after which he asked her if she had any wishes. The girl thought that he apparently did not listen to her at all, since she had already rejected him, so she replied that everything was fine and that she did not need anything. The gentleman exclaimed that it seemed that the little thing had spoiled her completely. Fanny objected that that was not the case at all, and that he had not spoiled her. In any case, everything was fine, but the young man interrupted her and said no. I think they talked before about how Estefania wanted to learn to value herself. She just needs to stop thinking so much, and she needs to speak immediately if a desire appears in her head. Therefore, Crowley will fulfill one of his wishes every day. Our heroine didn't understand what was happening to her, but refusing would make him even angrier, so she replied out loud that she was fine. After which, he began to think that even though he had accepted, he didn't even have any ideas of what to ask him today, for example. But suddenly, something occurred to him, and he said that since they had already decided, he wanted to go to sleep. It was already late, so she didn't lie about her desire. As soon as Fanny realized what time it was, she immediately wanted to sleep. The young man immediately snapped his fingers, and she immediately found herself under the blanket. Our heroine thought to herself that she didn't need any place she wanted to visit, or anything. Her only wish was to always be close to Mr. Chenel. After which, the girl closed her eyes and fell into a deep sleep. The next morning, Estefania woke up and noticed that she had slept very well. She then thought that she had actually fallen asleep during the conversation with the gentleman, and whether she should apologize for it. When she turned her head to the side, she saw a young man sitting on her bed. Our heroine was very surprised by what the young man was doing in her bed. Fanny wished him good morning and asked him how long he had been sitting in his room. The gentleman replied that he had not really gone anywhere and that she had been sleeping too long, so she should get up as it was time to leave. This is how strange our heroine's new day began. First, they all had breakfast together, including the boy and Crowley, after which we went to several jewelry boutiques. Then came the preparation of sweets, which is what Estefania likes to do most. And so the end of the day came, but the night was still close by. The girl did not understand why he burned her with his gaze all day long. Yuchi couldn't resist and said that he wanted to do this since morning, but the master usually knows what the expression temper one's ardor means. Yes, she asked him to spend more time with his fiancé, but not that much. Our heroine realized that it was the boy who asked her, but if that was the case, then it was understandable why Crowley had been following her all day. The young man replied that he had no intention of fulfilling her request, and that he was there because Fanny wanted him. The boy and Estefania looked at each other in surprise because they did not understand at all what was happening. The boy muttered that it seemed the teacher had misunderstood everything again. Chenel indignantly asked in what sense the girl herself had told him this last night. Fanny cautiously replied that she didn't remember any of that. The young man began to get angry and angrily asked him if he really didn't remember the previous night. The girl immediately began to say that she had misunderstood everything, and the boy pretended that he had not heard anything. Then Yuchi exclaimed that it seemed he was superfluous there, so he let the master spend the rest of the day alone with his beloved. And he meanwhile will go to see what magical requests he received this time, after which he said goodbye. Estefania immediately felt uneasy, because they would be left alone, wondering where that little boy had gone and why he had abandoned her. The young man turned his head and asked where he was looking. Our heroine blushed and replied that in any case, she did not remember having asked him for anything like that, so he should forgive her. The young man smiled and replied that he would forgive her this time, after which he asked her what her wish would be for today. The girl thought for a moment and replied that she did have a wish. When the boy asked her what it was, Estefania replied that she wanted to read a book. Do they even have a library in the castle? She would really like to go there. She thought to herself that since Mr. Chenel needed her to ask him for something so much, it would be better for her to talk to him about small things rather than something immodest. And in general, he took it too seriously. Fanny thought he would forget about her statement the next day. But why does the guy behave like this? Suddenly, the young man pulled her towards him and told her to hug him tightly. Literally, a moment later, they found themselves near some huge doors. The girl immediately backed away from him and wondered if she could even get that close to him. She then thanked him for taking her to the library and said she would go then, but noticed the young man following her. After which she smiled and said that she believed she could find her way around that room on her own so that he could get on with his business, and thanked him again for allowing her to take this opportunity. The young man replied that if she needed him, she should just call him, and immediately disappeared. Estefania breathed a sigh of relief and thought that she could now continue her investigation in peace. Walking through the library, he thought that he should find books about Yuga's illness, but he still doubts that he can be cured. But since the teacher told him to change, then it's time to do something about it. In general, she personally wanted to ask the master about his henchmen, but obviously, he would start asking why she was interested in this, so she shouldn't reveal her intentions. Perhaps the books of the previous ruler were still in this place, so he suddenly heard someone's voice. After which, our heroine looked around the corner to see who it was. It turned out to be Elliot, who was mopping the floor and asking some creatures flying around him if it was possible to clean it. Then the young man realized that Estefania was looking at him. The young man jumped back in horror and shouted, What's wrong with her? Why is this happening to him? Did Fanny forget her in the library? Did he really offend her again in some way? Then he began to shout the names of the teacher and the boy. But the girl quickly assured him that everything was fine and that she was alone. After which, our heroine asked what Elliot was doing there. After showing him the rag, the guy asked him what he thought while serving his punishment as a floor cleaner. Why did she notice his hand and ask what had happened? The young man pointed out that she probably hadn't seen him last time. This was the master's punishment for what the young man did to him. Estefania thought to herself that the knight had mentioned that he could kill anyone she ordered him to, but she had no idea that it was true. The girl even felt a little guilty in front of this narcissist, but only a little. The young man said that it was the first time he had been punished in this way, by having his limbs taken away, and his beauty reduced by half. Then the guy exclaimed that he shouldn't cry. Elliot didn't want to die at all. Our heroine responded in surprise that she wasn't actually crying. The boy said that she had that expression on her face just now, as if she was about to burst into tears. Suddenly, some small creatures flew towards him and began to ask him who she was. Because she was very pretty, Elliot exclaimed angrily that they should not avoid her. When our heroine asked who they were, the boy replied that of course it was embarrassing, but that was his strength. The young man of course thought that the relatives he would summon would inherit at least 100th part of his beauty, but it was not a terrible shame. Fanny objected that they were very pretty. The creatures started flying around her and told her that their work was done, so let her play with them. Elliot said he would like to ask her something, just in case she was really native to this world. The girl asked confusedly what he was talking about. The young man replied that a creature summoned by a wizard is a common sight in the Central Lands, but as a rule, they stick only to their master. However, there are exceptions to the rules. Fairies, spirits, demons, that is, living beings that do not belong to this world, but that relate positively to its inhabitants. Our heroine replied that she was neither a fairy nor a spirit, nor even a demon, and that she did not even know how to do magic. The boy replied that he had no doubt that she was human. He was just curious. In theory, the master could summon a creature without magic and take its magical energy for himself, although all this is at the level of thought and has no proof. After which, the young man apologized for having asked such an inappropriate question. I thought to myself that wizards also have a soft spot for the dead, or terminally ill, as ultimately their magical energy will belong to the wizard. But Chenel made it clear that he would never allow her to die. Estefania thought that this guy had discovered her worst secret. It wasn't even that she was the master's fake girlfriend, but that Fanny really wasn't from this world. Meanwhile, the creatures kept flying around our heroine and begged her to play with them since their owner was boring and didn't like doing that. The young man exclaimed that it was time to return home, and a formation appeared near his hand. Then he asked her why she had come to the library if she wanted to get rid of him by chance, and the girl replied that she wanted to find something. When Elliot asked her why she didn't ask the teacher or Yuchi, since they definitely wouldn't reject her, the girl replied that it was a personal matter and that they were always very busy lately. After which she exclaimed if the young man would help her in her search, but only this should remain between them. The man asked what would happen if he told or refused altogether. Our heroine replied that what she wanted to find would not harm anyone, but if she refused, then Mr. Chenel would simply destroy it for disobedience. The young man was very surprised and completely horrified by what he heard. Estefania thought to herself that she still wouldn't have told Crowley that she met him in that place, even if Elliot forgave her, but she needed help. She couldn't manage on her own, and there was no other way to come to an agreement with him. The young man scratched his head and noticed that she was indeed a very scary woman. Even at their first meeting, she was not outraged by his intimidation, as if she wanted the master to teach her a lesson personally. Our heroine thought about how to explain everything properly, but the boy interrupted her and replied that he himself knew everything perfectly well. She did not resist because she was afraid of him, after which he replied that it was fine that he would help and that he wouldn't tell anyone at all when Fanny said that she wanted to find everything about who ruled the Central Lands before Chenel Elliot was surprised as to why she needed it. The girl said that he ruled before Crowley came to power, and she doesn't even know how her fiancé became master, after which he feigned embarrassment and said that asking her about it would be somehow indecent and even a little awkward. The young man replied that he had done the right thing by not asking him about it. Chenel can't stand him, and every time someone mentions him, the knight's mood turns terribly bad. Then he began to tell that, at that time, he still lived on another continent, and he did not know the whole story, but he had heard something. The master began to rule about 5 years ago. Before his ascension to the throne, there was a power struggle. Under the reign of Lord Rudolfon, peace reigned in the Central Lands. But at one point, the young man simply went mad and began killing all the wizards he found in his path. No one knows why he went mad, but there were many victims who say that Norris even drank their blood. In the Central Lands, a real hell was happening. But out of nowhere, a great magician appeared, whose name is Chenel. Crow. He overthrew the previous ruler, and the inhabitants of the country began to worship him, and thus he became a master. However, Rodolphon still survived despite the fierce battle. It is said that he still dreams of returning to the throne and ruling the Central Lands, having killed Chenel in the process. That's why it's better not to ask the teacher about him, because it will only make the situation worse. Our heroine realized that Crowley's predecessor was a cruel, murderous tyrant, and she definitely couldn't ask him about the illness, because one careless word, and it would be the end for her. When Estefania asked him where he was now, the young man replied that they said he was hiding in the northern lands. The girl immediately remembered how the master had told her that in a week he would leave for the northern lands, and she would go with him. So I came to the conclusion that this trip suddenly became very dangerous. Then the young man asked if that was all, as he still had some business to attend to. Unexpectedly, his relatives accidentally pushed him while playing, and Elliot, losing his balance, began to fall on our heroine. Lying on the ground, Fanny immediately said that she understood that she had not done it on purpose, so everything was okay. But suddenly, the voice of Mr. Chenel was heard, who threateningly asked if he really wanted to die. The young man immediately fell to his knees and began to beg for forgiveness. Familiars began flying around Crowley and offered to play with them, or at least take them for a walk. The teacher grabbed one of them and squeezed him tightly in his fist, saying that they were really having too much fun. Elliot immediately said he would delete them now and began calling them rapidly again. The knight hissed that he saw that his life was not at all dear to him. Our heroine immediately defended him and said that the guy didn't push her on purpose. It happened by accident, and she wasn't hurt, so there was no need to punish him. She thought to herself that Chenel wouldn't tolerate a second mistake, but the young man was definitely not at fault this time, and she didn't want Crowley to get his hands dirty. Then he noticed that the young man seemed to have calmed down. He then asked if he could make a wish for the next day now. When the gentleman nodded, the girl asked him to give Elliot her hand back. The guy immediately muttered that the master had no obligation to return it to him, but Chenel asked him where his hand was at that moment and let him speak quickly. When the young man stammered and replied that Yuchi had taken it for himself, the master immediately disappeared. Elliot noted that he thought the end had come for him, and our heroine immediately apologized for all this. The young man replied that all this did not matter to him because she was completely innocent. Estefania noticed that as soon as the master left, he began to behave as usual, after which he wondered if he had called Crowley for help where he had come from then. Suddenly, the guy said that he didn't want to be in debt to her any longer, so he would immediately tell her to stay away from Magdalena. He had already spoken to her after the punishment, but apparently the girl had not learned the lesson. This woman is strong in charm magic so much that she can subjugate the minds of even the most powerful wizards. Fanny knows that in the original story, Lively enchanted the magicians and made them conspire against Angelica. Now our heroine has become a threat to her, so it is not surprising that she could do something similar to her. She thanked him out loud for the information and told him she would take it into account. The young man added that if something happened to her, this world would end. He realized that he wasn't joking at all. Not even the master was as dangerous as this little one. Meanwhile, Yuchi was about to fight some creature in the forest. The boy wasted no time and immediately began to destroy it. When the deed was accomplished, he felt someone appear behind him. It was the teacher who asked if he had Elliot's hand. When the boy answered yes, the young man ordered it to be given to him, but Yuchi objected that he had not yet learned his lesson. Then the little boy guessed that it was Estefania's work, so he replied that he would return it to the teacher, after which she added that she must first warn him that Fanny had taken an interest in Mr. Rudolphon, and in particular in her relationship with him. Hearing this, the young man began to get increasingly angry. The boy immediately said that he personally had not said anything to her, and had not even brought up the subject, but that he perfectly understood her feelings. But if the girl is dear to him, then he is obliged to tell her everything about a member of his family, Mr. Norris. Mr. Chenel hissed that they were not a family, and that there was no need to talk like that. Yuchi replied that he was right. The man had most likely been raised by Crowley, and that was all. The young man grabbed him by the neck and hissed that if he said one more word, he would finish the boy off. Yuchi replied that he had to take the risk, because his girlfriend would be very happy with this death. The guy immediately loosened his grip and said it was none of his business. The boy asks her if she really thinks so. Fani keeps her promise, but he doesn't even try to become a worthy boyfriend for her. He then added that it was good that he did what he wanted, and that the boy would not insist, after which he snapped his fingers. What he asked for immediately appeared in the young man's hands, after which he told him to take it and leave, because he didn't want to keep Estefania waiting. The most powerful wizard immediately turned around and began to walk away. The boy looked at him and thought it was very interesting what would happen next. After a while, Elliot was already looking at his returned hand and couldn't believe what he saw. Had the master really forgiven him? Maybe it wasn't even about this girl. She just finally realized that the young man was useful to her and changed her mind. The young man whistled at him, telling him to go now. The gentleman would not repeat it twice. Narcissus immediately begged for forgiveness and quickly began to flee from his sight. Then Crowley looked at our heroine and asked if by any chance she wanted to know something about him. The girl wondered why he suddenly decided to ask her that question. Chenel added that the girl said she was interested in someone. Estefania immediately remembered Elliot's words about how he couldn't stand him. Every time someone mentioned him, the teacher's mood worsened, after which he began to wonder if the young man was alluding to Rodolphon. Norris. So she immediately started saying that she probably heard about this from Yuchi, but she wasn't that interested anymore. She asked him once about the past ruler out of pure curiosity and nothing more. She thought to herself that she needed to forget about Norris, as it would be too expensive to get involved with such a person. Crowley asked him if he wanted to know about him, because he was about to leave the palace. Estefania didn't understand what he was talking about and what kind of strange question it was, after which she replied that of course not, and that she would leave him as soon as the time came. He then thought that the boy must have decided that Fani wanted to stay in the castle forever, as he was trying to find out as much as possible about him and was looking for the master's weaknesses. Meanwhile, the young man remained silent and thought about something. The young man remembered Rodolfo's words, that he was destined to be alone forever. Unexpectedly, the greatest wizard took our heroine by the hand. Stephanie decided that she was angry and started screaming that she would definitely leave that palace, that she would definitely keep her promise. But when she opened her eyes, she couldn't understand why Crowley was looking at her like that. After a while, Fani noticed that the gentleman was behaving extremely strangely. He did not let go of her hand all day, except when she went to the bathroom. At night, the girl stayed in bed and couldn't sleep at all. Then she looked at the boy sleeping next to her and thought that, on top of everything, he insisted that they would sleep together now. Maybe something bad happened. What's wrong with him? He worries so much about her and doesn't understand why. If Angelica were in her place, everything would have happened completely differently, but Fani will never be able to take her place. And since she had the chance to be close to him, she would give him all the love she had, after which she whispered that she would always love Mr. Chenel. Then she murmured that she would have a wonderful dream and fell into a deep sleep. It turned out that the young man had not slept at all and heard everything perfectly, after which Crowley approached her and also fell asleep. The next day, the girl opened her eyes and realized she was lying in Chenel's arms. Then he suddenly jumped up and ran towards the front door. The girl did not understand how she found herself in the arms of the greatest wizard. He is also so handsome that she would rather die for him than from an illness, and she would even be happy. Estefania was sitting by the door and couldn't understand what had happened. Suddenly, a young man appeared, and he seemed very worried. Seeing our heroine, Chenel asked her what she was doing there and why she was sitting on the floor. Estefania replied that she just wanted to get some fresh air. That was all. Mr. Crowley didn't respond, but simply immediately lifted her into his arms. The girl still did not understand what was happening to her, because he was behaving in an extremely strange manner. After which, Chenel put her back on the bed and lay down next to her. Fani was so nervous that she couldn't even move, but she said that today she would ask him to take care of his business. The young man replied that no, that yesterday he asked to fulfill his wish for today. Elliot his hand back, which he did. Our heroine replied that she should then fulfill the request today instead of tomorrow, but the boy firmly replied no. Then Chenel finally told her to shut up, but Fanny still couldn't even move a finger and wondered if they were really going to continue sleeping next to each other. She had a terrible panic attack and screamed the child's name out loud. The doors immediately opened and Yuchi appeared asking what had happened. The girl immediately ran and hugged the boy, who did not understand anything. He then turned his attention to the young man, who began to get incredibly angry. When the young man whistled for him to go away, the boy replied that he didn't care, but Funny apparently had no intention of letting him go. When Crowley began to lift her up with the help of magic, our heroine screamed in despair because she could not bear his company for one more second. After a while, she was already sitting on the bench, telling Yuchi everything that had happened, that they were having a real Santa Claus time. Barbara. Estefania added that the knight was probably very angry with her for such words. The boy replied that he thought he was not angry, but rather surprised and a little upset. Then she realized that the master had slept in the same bed as her today. When the girl answered yes and asked if something was wrong, the baby replied that Chenel never sleeps in front of people. Plus, his schedule was low on sleep, and Yuchi only saw him sleeping in bed during the full moon. But since he had fallen asleep so sweetly in front of her, could she allow him to continue sharing her bed? Fanny did not know what to answer. He then added that he was used to not sleeping much, but magicians are people too, and since Crowley can only sleep fully with her, then this should be allowed. Fanny interrupted him and said that she didn't think he would approve of such a decision. Most likely, the boy was simply tired from the day before and fell asleep without even noticing her presence. Yuchi asked that if the master returned to his chambers, he would not throw him out and would let him sleep in peace. Our heroine exclaimed that there was no way she would sleep with them if the master returned. The girl stood up and said she clearly felt better, so the plan for today was to try on the dress she would wear to the dance in the northern lands. On the way, she explained that the costume was almost finished, but the seamstress wanted the girl to try it on, and Lucy would also like to hear her advice on how to add some details. As long as the girl is not busy with anything, so that she has time to finish the dress. If it does not fit her, or if for some reason she feels uncomfortable with it, she should not be ashamed to tell her. Yuchi will tell the seamstress about all the changes. As he opened the door, the boy added that he had not seen it yet, but he was sure that it had been simply amazing. But when they entered the room, they saw that the finished dress was in tatters. Behind it was an open balcony door, and it was clear that someone had entered and deliberately damaged it. The boy immediately ran towards the dress and began to examine it. He then went to the balcony and noticed that he seemed to know who was involved in this. After a while, the boy was already questioning Dooley and ordering him to explain everything. Suddenly, a young man appeared and asked what was wrong. Why were they scolding him? The boy explained that he broke the dress that Lucy had made for Fanny. Through investigation, Yuchi discovered that the guy was the culprit. The girl remembered it from the time they arrived at the training camp to test the properties of the ring. He was quite quiet and reserved, so she didn't get to know him well and can't tell if Dooley is capable of something like that. The baby went on to explain that it happened last night and that hair and animal tracks were found at the crime scene. From the color of the fur and the size of the legs, it can be concluded that the torn dress is the work of her relative. So I repeated once more whether he had anything to say to the young man in my defense. Suddenly, the young man bowed his head and asked for forgiveness. Estefania exclaimed that he must have a reason for doing something like that. The boy explained that he did not order his relative to do this, but that as a master, he has full responsibility for what his servant did. The boy said that our heroine had already met him before. The girl immediately remembered those huge, terrifying red eyes she saw in the window, after which he thought that Mr. Chenel had shown him his true form. Mr. Dooley's servant was not a terrifying beast at all. The young man realized that this did not seem strange to them, since a family member could not do something without the owner's permission. Yuchi agreed and said that he too thought something was wrong. He then suggested that we first return to the crime scene. On the way, the guy said that his creature Vito usually snoops around the castle without much attention from the outside, but the wizards are used to seeing familiars because they don't do anything without a direct order. It is common for wizards to summon familiars as their servants. The stronger the wizard, the higher the rank of his creature. Lord Dooley's familiar is a high-ranking creature. Usually low-ranking servants have little intelligence and are capable of making small jokes, but not this one. When the children saw the dress, they noticed that the only thing left of it was its name. It is immediately clear that Lucy sewed it as the young man sees traces of magic in the fabric and will be beside herself with rage when she sees it. The boy turned to the young man and told him to call his relative. After Dooley recreated the formation and summoned Vito, a huge beast immediately appeared. When the young man said he had something to talk to him about, the creature asked him exactly what he wanted to know. The boy asked if he had torn the dress. The relative replied yes. But when he asked him why he had done it, Vito replied that he had not really meant to do it. Yuchi asked if he meant that his mind was being manipulated by someone. The animal replied that he could not answer this question because as soon as he woke up, he immediately saw his dress in tatters. The boy replied that everything was clear to him and thanked him for telling him everything and added that Vito could go. The young man exclaimed that it was clear who was responsible and who had done it, so it was necessary to go and fix it with her. The boy exclaimed that there was no need to go anywhere. The criminal himself came to the scene of the crime. Magdalena appeared at the door and asked who the criminal was and what the young detectives were doing in general. The guy shouted that she was the one who had bewitched the familiar's mind. The girl pretended not to understand anything and exclaimed that it was very rude of him since she did not know what he was talking about. The young man got angry and shouted at him to stop doing nonsense. Only his magic was capable of something like that. Yuchi stopped him and wondered if she had ordered the existing Dooley to tear Fani's dress. Lively replied that, as the girl had already said, she had no idea what was going on. It seemed that the dog had gotten completely out of control and had destroyed the lady's dress. It's very unfortunate, but she doesn't understand the magnitude of the tragedy. Lucy can make the dress again, right? So it's stupid to make such a fuss about some outfit. Our heroine began to get angry because Magdalena did not like the seamstress's work at all. The girl continued saying that this little girl only likes to sit and sew. She never sees the light of day. She only makes friends with a thread and a needle. A pitiful girl who can't do anything else. Let the boys think that this incident gave her a new reason to live another day of her miserable existence. And if she starts being sarcastic, then Estefania can always complain about her to the master. Magdalena in the face with all his might. The girl grabbed her cheek and screamed, "How dare he do it?" But Fani ordered her to apologize immediately to Lucy and would not allow her to insult the girl any further. Lively asked her what she had said wrong. It was the pure truth, as if the girl had been familiar with the baby since day one. Estefania hissed at him that if he didn't apologize to her right now, our heroine would take appropriate measures. When the girl asked what, for example, Fani replied that she would tell Mr. Chenel about his behavior. Magdalena got very angry and wanted to hit her, so she started to clench her fist. A young man's voice was heard saying that he would not advise her to do that, since her attack would come back at her only with twice the force, and that she should not forget that she was being protected. Then, Lively exclaimed that she really wanted to get along with her, but it was a shame that it didn't work out. After she turned around abruptly and started to leave, our heroine wanted to stop her, but the boy grabbed his hand and told him he shouldn't do that. After a while, Lucy saw what had happened to the dress she had created. Estefania started apologizing and saying she was sorry because she had tried so hard for her, and in the end, everything was ruined. Yuchi exclaimed, "What did she have to do with it? Let him look at the little girl. She is not angry with her at all." The girl just stood there and silently stared at the torn suit. Piz told him that if he wanted to punish him, he should do it. The girl suddenly became sad and looked as if she was in some kind of trance. While our heroine was thinking about what had just happened, a relative appeared in the room. The animal stopped in front of the baby and bowed its head silently. Literally, a moment later, a magical formation appeared behind the baby, after which a powerful flow of energy hit the creature. After that, the boy said that they would talk to Magdalena later, and that there was no need to worry about the dress, because it would be as good as new for the dance. The girl smiled and thanked them for everything they do for her. The boy said that they had already fixed the dress, and now they could rest, and at the same time, he began to think about what to cook for dinner. Unexpectedly, our heroine apologized and said she wanted to make sure Vito was okay. after which he turned around and started running somewhere, saying that he would be back for dinner. When Fani approached the animal, it asked her why the girl was coming. She replied that she just wanted to talk a little. The familiar Rose smelled it and noticed that the smell was very interesting. Estefania immediately remembered Elliot's words about how a creature summoned by a wizard is common in the Central Lands, but they only stick to their master. She was already muttering out loud that his scent really indicated that he would soon die. Vito replied that he didn't know if she would die or not, but that he simply found her smell pleasant, and that was why he wanted to talk to her. Remembering the girl's words about her rotting corpse smell, our heroine realized that Lucy was a demon. The creature replied that it was true and that its owner was that strange guy with round glasses. Now, the girl understood why she did not act of her own will. In the original story, there was not the slightest mention of this. She thought the girl was a magician, like all the others. It is natural that she could not know some of the small details that were not mentioned in the novel. The author did not write them down because this would not have affected the original plot in any way. The familiar explained that this demon is much stronger and a couple of ranks higher than him. Her sense of smell is special, and she can sense approaching death. Estefania thought to herself that a girl who sensed death was incredibly comical to have met her here. She said out loud that Lucy told her that she smelled like a rotting corpse, but after a while she said it started to smell different. What could this be due to? The relative replied that he did not know, and that it would be better to ask him directly. However, there is no doubt that this is related to the king of the magicians, the man everyone calls the master. Our heroine looked at him in surprise and asked what he meant. Vito replied that he couldn't feel the strong scent of affection that enveloped her. She literally radiates this magic as if it unconditionally belongs to him alone. Perhaps her physical state changes due to his magic in her body. The girl thought about his words. Maybe his magic was on her because they slept together, or it was because of the ring. When the creature saw the ring on her finger, she realized that Chenel was in love with her. So this explains why Stephanie was literally marked with magic. Our heroine replied that he was wrong. The knight would never love someone like her. There is no charm in her, and even if her paths with Angelica had separated in this story, nothing would have changed since not even her family could love Fani. So why would such a wonderful person love her? He then said that he would talk to Lucy about his smell, and added that he had one more question for him. When she first came to the castle, he went to her room at night. Can the creature say why? Estefania remembers those scarlet eyes, full of madness, and now looks at Vito as if he were not him. The relative replied that this was not the case, and that he did not understand what he was talking about. Fani thought it was the same case as with the dress. What if that day her conscience was controlled by Magdalena? But he and the girl did not know each other at that time, and she gave no indication at their first meeting that she had seen him before, after which he thanked the animal for the explanation and clarified that that was exactly what he wanted to know. So she was about to leave, but she turned around and asked him how he felt since the girl had hit him very hard. The creature sighed deeply and replied that it was in great pain. On the way, the girl thought that if Lively was not the first to manipulate Vito's conscience and use him to get rid of those he did not like, maybe the girl was just practicing that day. But in reality, Magdalena's charm magic is simply terrifying. If it weren't for this ring, it would have been difficult for her to survive in this castle. It is necessary to speak frankly with the gentleman, what you think and what you want in general. Of course, she would like to avoid such a conversation, but it is necessary. To avoid causing more trouble for Mr. Chenel, she must understand what he himself wants. Then looking around, I realized that I was so deep in thought that I didn't even realize where I had come from. Behind her, she saw a wall destroyed by magic, after which he thought that the boy would be beside himself with rage when he saw this. Suddenly, he heard a terrible bang and turned around to see Vito, who looked crazy and was drooling. Our heroine began to ask why she was in the castle. Maybe she wanted to ask something. But the otherworldly creature did not respond, but instead grew angrier and growled louder. They were the same crazy red eyes she saw that night. Stephanie didn't understand what to do, and was so scared she couldn't even say a word. The girl backed up until she was at the edge. Magdalena suddenly appeared, saying that she seemed to be in a desperate situation at the moment. She simply decided that since she couldn't attack her, why not do it another way? But she couldn't even imagine that Fani would fall into that trap so easily. after which she asked what it would be like to be the master's girlfriend now. She was so sure of herself that she felt power in her hands. Forgive her, but she will never have the master. She has no place with him. After which Magdalena screamed, "Die!" And the animal pounced on our heroine. Estefania automatically took a step back and immediately began to fall. No matter how much everyone tried to protect her, the girl managed to kill her, but she had no intention of dying so easily. He then pulled out a boxing glove button and said Lively's words about how sorry she was that they never got along. The girl did not expect such a turn of events and did not even have time to dodge the blow. Having lived next door to Crowley, she realized three things. First, Fani had lived her entire life as if she were in a trap. Second, she shouldn't underestimate the power of the people around her. And third, she just wanted to die at his hands. If she had asked for something like that, the young man would surely have killed her for her insolence. But our heroine wants to live with him until the end and end her life as she wishes. It seems that the master will not listen to her, will not come, and will not have time to save her. Will this really be the end? Suddenly, she appeared from a past life, who said that Estefania wanted to free herself from the ties of the past and change. So maybe the time had come. She has nothing to fear. Just say her name, and that will be enough. Our heroine realized that this was right after all she really wanted to change, so she mentally asked Mr. Chenel to save her, and this request will become her first step. The young man appeared out of nowhere and immediately picked her up in his arms. She couldn't believe he actually came, but the boy asked her what happened. Then Chenel saw Magdalena lying on the ground unconscious. The young man immediately began to get angry. Our heroine thought that if she didn't stop him, the story of the novel would change dramatically, after which she pulled at his shirt and begged him not to kill her. Crowley smiled mischievously and asked why they should leave her alive. Lively loved everyone and everything she wanted eventually became hers. Her father said he contacted a fashion house and they made a dress especially for her. The girl began to be capricious, that it was not pretty she wanted a shiny dress. The Pope immediately asked for forgiveness and said that he would have the most beautiful dress, decorated with precious stones sewn to her measurements. At the dance, everyone present admired Magdalena's beauty. One of the boys said that she was engaged to a prince, but this is not surprising because she is the most beautiful girl in the Western lands. He replied differently that he agreed, but he still liked a girl like Princess Mia. The girl heard this and began to direct her charms in his direction. The young man immediately changed his mind and said that she was the most beautiful woman of all, and that for such a lovely lady, it would not be a sin to sacrifice one's life. One day, the father burst into his daughter's bedroom and asked her how she could understand all this and why she had decided to go to the Central Lands, after which she clarified whether it was because of the broken engagement with the prince. Magdalena replied that she didn't give a damn about the prince, whom she had never seen in her life. The girl found a worthy husband. This is Chenel. Crowley, he will become her fiancé. She heard that the teacher was an inaccessible man, but she was sure that sooner or later he would fall in love with her. Until Estefania came into their lives, the girl did not understand what the master saw in her was an obstacle between her and Crowley, so she decided that if the girl disappeared, then the master would finally look at her. She believed in this with all her heart. But why was he strangling her now with the help of his magical abilities? Suddenly, a she-devil appeared, Lucy, who asked him to stop. The young man asked him what he wanted. Was he really going to stop him? The girl replied no, that he just wanted to finish her off himself. Magdalena looked at his black wings and his pointed ears and could not believe what she saw. These signs pointed to a demon. These creatures sometimes take human form, but she didn't know Lucy was one, so she started screaming loudly for her to forgive her. But the young man and the girl looked at her attentively and at the same time murmured that she must die, after which the boys unleashed all their magical power on her. When it was all over, the boy realized that he himself should have done this a long time ago. It is not clear what this woman of such unpleasant character expected. The baby remembered our heroine's words when she was little, that she wanted him to be the happiest in the world. And then he thought that he had to make her as happy as possible, no matter what it cost him, and therefore he had to do everything right. After a while, they were already sitting together, and Yuchi asked him if he understood what they were going to talk about now. The little girl was actually worried and didn't think she would ever have to use that thing. Fani recalled how he handed her this glove and said that although she had a ring that would protect her, if something happened, she was an attacker and needed it to defend herself. When the girl said that it was too big and it was not clear how to carry it, Yuchi exclaimed that there was no need to worry. The glove can be made smaller, so that our heroine can always have it at hand. Estefania that I didn't actually think about using it until this very day. Then the girl asked what had happened to Magdalena, because she had heard her screams outside. After Mr. Chenel picked her up, he immediately teleported her into the room. Then the young man suddenly disappeared, and she doesn't know what happened next. The boy thoughtfully replied that Lively was either dead or not. Our heroine pointed out that if she is really dead, then the original story will be irrevocably changed. Suddenly, Estefania lost consciousness, and Yuchi could not understand what was happening to her. When he came to, he began to apologize and say that it seemed that the tiredness had simply accumulated, and the baby asked him to stop apologizing. Fani told herself that who would have thought that she would suffer from a high fever. Suddenly, the boy said that people don't have such a high fever for no reason. He knows perfectly well that she is trying with all her might to hide her poor health. She felt sick too often, and he just couldn't ignore her condition. The girl replied that she simply gets tired very easily, so she did not bother him with those stories, so he should forgive her. The boy replied in an annoyed tone that he was very sorry that he couldn't help her in any way. Our heroine immediately exclaimed that there was no need to say that because Yuchi shouldn't do it. Then the little boy said that he shouldn't have brought up that subject just now, that he should let her rest, and that he would visit her tomorrow. When the boy left, our heroine began to think that the reason was not his illness. She was too shocked by how irrevocably history had changed. Then Stephanie carefully removed the wedding ring from her finger. He was immediately overcome with terrible pain and began to have convulsions. When the girl put it back on, she immediately felt much better, as if she was not sick. Even though Magdalena is dead, the knight will still meet Angelica one day. But she has a premonition that history has now changed forever. This feeling has become especially strong after Chenel's recent changes in behavior. Why does he want her not to live in the past? Why does he share the same bed with her? Why does he want her to survive? Although it is impossible, and Fanny has clearly decided not to build castles in the air, perhaps he has fallen in love with her, after which she muttered that the master loved her. But that simply couldn't be true. The young man who silently entered his room was simply shocked by what he heard. The young man's first impression of her was that she was very strange. Whether she was a princess or not, nothing stopped the master from killing her. That was why he did not want to tolerate her secrets or her antics, and he was ready to get rid of her immediately. But when she screamed that she really liked the master and that he had the right not to love her, but Fanny did not allow him to say that his feelings were not real, the boy felt a chill in his heart for the first time. Chenel didn't understand what that feeling was and what caused it, so he decided to leave it in the castle. Then Crowley approached the boy and told him that from that day on, he would take care of that woman. Yuchi noted that there were again no specific details, as he has a habit of not explaining anything properly, after which he added that as he understood it, he needed to take care of Estefania. But why? The most powerful replied that from that day on, he would live in the castle. The boy couldn't even imagine that the master would allow someone to live in it. It seems like some kind of joke. Then he asked if the girl was his guest, and the young man replied that she was his fiancée. The boy expected to hear anything but this and was surprised, after which he said that he couldn't refuse, but that he was stuck with these monsters and would only return in a week. "So who will take care of the girl during your absence?" replied the gentleman, a narcissist. Yuchi exclaimed that Elliot is the worst choice, because he simply has no hope, after which he exclaimed that, okay, that meant he needed to take care of everything as quickly as possible. This boy did not agree to take care of her for no reason, and it shows in the way he behaves with her. That's why the young man kept his distance from her at first. The boy felt that if anyone dared to touch her, he would definitely explode from overwhelming animal rage. But why is he so afraid and admires him? Crowley thought she was a self-confident princess, but in reality, she turned out to be fragile as matchstick. When she confessed her love to him with that happy smile on her face, his heart began to beat faster and faster. Did Chenel really fall in love with her? But he didn't know what was going on in this woman's head, and he himself couldn't understand it. When he was 5 years old, he and Rodolphon were walking through the snowy mountains, And the man said that he didn't really have a single emotion, that he was like a doll or something. While this may be true, his parents abandoned him at a young age, and he doesn't know how to control his magic. Secondly, the baby almost died because he couldn't even use it properly. What kind of life does he have anyway? Chenel kicked him hard in the leg and ordered him to shut his mouth at once. The young man exclaimed that he was behaving so disrespectfully, even though he should be grateful to him for not being devoured by the monsters. The future great wizard replied that he did not care at all. Rodolphon sighed deeply and said, "Well, I couldn't leave a fool like that alone in the mountains. Unfortunately, people like them are condemned to loneliness, those who will never know what true love and feelings are. If they say words of love to you, it is most likely because of your power or your pretty face. Therefore, let the boy not even try to find love in someone. It is a great pity that Norris never met anyone who could convince him otherwise." After which he looked at Crowley and noticed that he seemed to like being alone anyway. As the boy said, no one ever loved him. Everyone always needed something from him. Although he was quite tired of the life of a man surrounded by faceless dolls, he was not going to change anything about it. Chenel can't fall in love even if it sounds like nonsense, so you should discard this thought. This was until the young man felt that same fear. She continued to wonder why she spoke and acted the way she did, until she heard Estefania murmur in her sleep that the teacher loved her. Although the boy tried his best to escape his feelings, he still gave her a ring that fit perfectly on the ring finger of her left hand. As soon as she mentioned his name, he immediately appeared at the girl's side and always made an effort to achieve her goal. The young man knows that Fanny has doubts, but it doesn't matter anymore. No matter what she really has in mind, Chenel will not let her escape. The girl can only blame herself for this, and the moment she appeared in front of him, she then whispered out loud that Estefania would wake up soon. The next morning, our heroine's thoughts were not focused on him, but on what awaited her in the room. Seeing a woman, the girl asked what all this meant and who she was. The boy exclaimed that he had brought him a doctor. He believed that it was better to entrust this health measure to him and not to the wizards. After which, he waved goodbye to them and left them alone. Then he remembered something and added that as far as Vito was concerned, there was no need to be afraid anymore, as he was not allowed to enter freely now. Estefania did not know what to do, because when the doctor examined her, he would surely notice the symptoms, and this could not be allowed. Then she said that she thanked him for coming so far to get here, but that she didn't need any proof. She had already been seen by a doctor before, and he said she was fine. She was just tired, and there was no need to examine her again. She thought to herself that she had to prevent this by all means necessary, because if she was examined, the results would be seen by Yuchi and Mr. Chenel and everyone else, and none of them should know the truth. The woman listened attentively and told her that if she had any concerns, she could share them with her, and the doctor would try to help her. The physician undertakes not to disclose information about the patient's condition to anyone without his or her direct consent, and can guarantee this. Fanny thought for a moment and said that if this exam stayed between them, and she promised not to reveal the results to anyone, then Fanny agreed. The doctor replied that, of course, and introduced herself, saying that she was the court physician of the Western lands, and that her name was Gilnet, and that she was very pleased to meet him. The girl could not even imagine that one day she would be examined by a court physician, how Yuchi was able to persuade her to go to the Central Lands. Estefania began to explain that she suffered from Yuga's progressive disease and that she had less than 3 months to live, something she knew before arriving here. And she came here to have no regrets before she died because she really wanted to. More than a month had passed since the beginning of his stay within these walls, after which he asked how bad everything was. The woman replied that she understood that her statement might seem strange to her, but that the girl's condition had not changed at all since the diagnosis. Our heroine was initially surprised. Then she looked at the ring and wondered why. When the doctor asked her if something strange had happened to her, Estefania replied that after the magician gave her that ring, she felt much better. The doctor said that this had some relation to his condition and asked him to explain in more detail. Our heroine replied that whoever gave it to her said that he had put protective spells on it, and that according to other wizards, it contained enormous magical power. The woman replied that if it were really big, it could hurt her. According to Dr. Gilnet, who also studied magic and magicians, each magical instrument has power, some more, some less. The higher the magic indicator in them, the greater the possibility of influencing the body of the norm. This can only have negative consequences and make matters worse. That is why we cannot talk about always carrying a magic instrument with us. It is dangerous to pour magic power into the norm. This is a well-known fact. Apparently, the magician who gave the ring does not know it. But she is more surprised by the fact that the magic of the ring somehow stopped the spread of the disease. This is the first time she has seen this. But what if we assume that magic is harmless to a norm suffering from Yuga disease? However, the fact is that for an ordinary person, any magical effect is poison. Everything she said was nothing more than a hypothesis whose authenticity was only probable, so now her task would be to refute it or find evidence that Fanny had not taken off the ring. Then the woman added that Doña Estefania should not lose hope that they would fight together. After a while, the girl reflected on the fact that having arrived at the castle, she did not even believe that she would be able to find the key to solving her illness. But if the wedding ring really saved her from death and disease, then she simply owes her life to Mr. Crowley. And what if Fanny can then keep him forever? She still has no faith that his death can be avoided, but at least she can stay with him and maintain her health. Suddenly, a young man appeared, who immediately took her in his arms and sat her on his lap. Estefania did not understand what all this meant.